The age of the great resurrected has come. This story was not supposed to be a novel. The news reported various terrible things about the creator of this story. There was an explosive increase in deaths and mysterious disappearances throughout the entire country. No connection could be established between these cases, and some events were particularly shocking to the public. The age of the great resurrected is a mystical phenomenon that has alarmed the entire population. There was some debate on the internet about whether the reason for her strange appearance was so-called reincarnation. In some ways, it sounded like the ravings of people from the tabloid press, but there really were reasons for it. If you look at videos of deaths recorded on a phone, you can find one common detail, namely that they all received a spam message with an offer to ensure their lives, just like the beautiful dark-haired girl did at the moment she died. She gradually lost consciousness. However, she saw how the ambulance workers approached her. They immediately ordered that a stretcher be brought to them, and another guy tried to talk to the girl. The girl did not answer this. She was in incredible pain. She thought about her mother and father. In fact, before she got into an accident, she read this message, and now, when she was already on the verge of death, the girl called for consent to ensure her life. Thus, she was registered, and immediately after she died, the girl heard distant screams that told her to wake up. She opened her eyes and they gave her their reader number. She looked around and didn't understand at all where she was. Everything around was incredibly strange and unfamiliar. There were many different people in that place. They all stood above huge screens on which each had something written. She looked to the side and saw how one girl approached the administrator, who said that the results of her evaluation of the resurrected had arrived. The girl's level of difficulty was F, so she congratulated the lady reader. The girl who came into this world was very surprised. She had absolutely no idea what kind of assessment was being discussed and what was going on around her. But at that moment, an unfamiliar voice addressed the girl, called her player number, and said that now it was her turn. She jumped up in fright and turned her head back to see who was talking to her. And then she saw a small dog that had small wings, and thanks to this, he could fly. It was this dog that spoke to her, and he also had a small tablet in his hands. But the dog said that he was the person in charge of the headquarters of the Resurrected Evaluation Department. So he asked her not to call him a simple dog anymore. But the girl did not understand what headquarters they were talking about and what was happening around her. She would really like to hear an explanation. But the animal told the reader that the girl had died and that this was the afterlife. Of course, upon hearing this, the girl was shocked and immediately broke into a sweat. She could not believe that she had actually died. But the dog explained that in their day, the gods responsible for global public works are interested in content. Webtoons, games, movies, and TV series have stopped just as masterpieces of novels, and if God works hard, he can embody the world, that is, recreate it. The dog also said that a project was currently underway to send dead souls from the earth to the recreated world. Of course, not every person could become such a resurrected dog said that he was sure that the girl was well suited for resurrection, considering that she was called to the afterlife earlier than expected. He asked the lady with a smile on his face if she would like to apply for a certain genre. The girl, who was still shocked by the fact of her death, remained silent for a while. But eventually she came to her senses and, looking at the dog, said that she would like to get into a romantic fantasy education. The girl believed that she could be sure as a reader of her all genres that the romantic fantasy education did not require any special efforts during the passage. And she was really very confident in this because she had tried many different genres and settled on this one, where there were a minimum of difficulties. This genre was the best and provided a road of flowers and money. The girl said that her foster family never loved her. She lived in a big house and then lost her parents, brother, and even her home. Then there was also the money for insurance on it when she became independent after completing her civil service. And soon she died and the deposit for the studio was taken away, so she considered this life very unfair. She wanted to forget about her past life and enjoy the love of her family, becoming the main character of a childcare novel. She asked very much to be assigned there. The organizer immediately smiled and said that he would definitely take her request into account. But she had to wait a while he entered the necessary data into the system. After that, the results of the assessment were ready, and he told her to check the screen and also to tell what it ultimately showed her. But when the girl raised her head up, she saw that the difficulty level was S-class, and because of this, she was incredibly upset. The organizer, seeing this, was amazed and said that only one of many had achieved such a level, so he congratulated her on such a great achievement. The girl, in turn, was not at all as happy as the rest of the people around her. They even turned around and said that she had received the best story and level. In fact, She was sent to Sagufi, which was a world destroyed by the outbreak of the underworld. The main character from the order dies. And many times she died. It was a romance with a million sweet potatoes. The girl was already in despair with the result she had received, but she still decided to find out who exactly she would eventually turn into. But the organizer said that the owner of the S level likes the educational genre, so he will make her a cute girl. Of course, she will also have pink hair. Then he said that it would be the daughter of a simple servant who is commanded by the main character. The girl was very impressed with the role that she got. She believed that even the trees on the street could have provided more benefit in that world than the character into which she now had to reincarnate. However, the organizer ignored these words and told her to quickly pass through the gates before they closed. The girl wanted to object to something, but the organizer told her not to worry. The resurrection control system would definitely be able to help her with everything, so she wouldn't be alone. But then the organizer looked at his tablet and was very surprised because she became the first buyer of a full package of life insurance for the resurrected. Therefore, the girls definitely had nothing to worry about at all. She stopped in front of the gate and asked what this meant anyway. After all, she had never even heard of such a thing before. But the organizer continued to rejoice at what he found out and said that now it was clear why she had such a level. She was the only one who was so lucky during the resurrection. She was the only buyer in the whole world. People around her heard about all this and even began to envy the girls, but she herself did not understand anything. She turned to the organizer and asked if he could explain everything to her, in at least more detail because she didn't know anything at all. The little dog smiled happily and said that in fact it was impossible to put it off any longer. She needed to enter the portal as soon as possible. And finally, he said that she would have the patronage of God himself. At that moment, the girl had already begun to be sucked into the portal. At first, she was happy about what he said. However, then she realized the significance of these words and was already incredibly scared. After a short journey, the girl had a system and was shown a new message. The system told the heroine about the privileges of a full life insurance package, a mandatory training period, support for ultra-fast growth, and a one-time cash payment. The system advised the girl to postpone the start of the original story and begin the mandatory training period. During the training, the survival difficulty was adjusted to Class F, and the range was limited. Since the original genre is an endless reincarnation, a round of the original was appointed, which began after training. The girl had to wait for some time. She started loading. She heard all these messages in her head, and she herself gradually began to wake up and come to consciousness. Soon, when she fully opened her eyes, she noticed that she was now in a completely different place. She remembered that she had died, which meant that she had been thrown into another world. The girl looked at her small hands and realized that she was not very grown up. Then she went to the mirror and saw her reflection in it. The girl succumbed to reincarnation. Now she was a little girl with beautiful long pink hair and green eyes. Soon she received a new notification from the system that the synchronization of Iris Rodalant with the system was complete. Some time passed from that moment, and the girl was able to adapt to that world quite quickly. All this time she did not leave the mirror because she considered her appearance incredibly cute and beautiful. However, then she realized that she had to think through everything down to the smallest detail, because she was put into such a body and forced to play in it. And besides, this was the case of the daughter of an aristocrat who abused her power in relation to the main character. Since Iris knew this story, she also remembered that there were several such abusers. So somehow she needed to find out which of the aristocrats was her father. But when she fell to the ground, a hologram suddenly began to appear in front of her. There appeared a small diagram of the mansion, as well as several warnings that could help the girl. Iris was very happy about this because the interface was like in the game. She was even given a map of the entire mansion. This made her work much easier. But then she saw that she was in the castle of the Count of Killet in the far east of the Winchester Kingdom. In fact, Countess Killet's son was a hooligan, and now the girl finally understood who he was. Initially, he was the son of a fencing master. However, he was not so talented, and therefore bought the knighthood for himself with money. In the original, he almost died when he tried to go into the dungeon, but he was saved by the kind main character. The main character did not want a reward. However, the scoundrel said that he would compensate for everything and took the count to his mansion. It is quite obvious what happens to people who have met such scoundrels. In the end, the scoundrel showed himself to be a good mercenary, and when he arrived at the estate, he washed his hands of it and simply kicked him out. And when the main character leaves his castle, an explosion of the underworld occurs nearby, and the castle is incinerated by evil spirits. The sweet potato season was a long episode compared to the sour lemon. so Iris had a very hard job ahead of her. The disaster that will unfold in the killer estate will be enough for her to escape from this place. The only problem was that it could happen anywhere and anytime. Hell was already spreading throughout the world like a tumor. The explosion would break out anywhere and take many lives, so Iris knew that as soon as the real story began, only death would await her. If she knew the original story in detail, then everything would be much simpler. However, resurrection to save the world is what she read when she was still in high school. Accordingly, she definitely could not know all the details, so she practically did not remember the story. The girl burst into tears and thought that if she had read this story just once and remembered everything, she would have definitely been able to enter the best rural university, but unfortunately this was not the case. Soon the system hologram suddenly began to change before her eyes. Now there was a bookshelf with the menu title, and she was also offered combined training. The girl immediately wondered what this could be, a communal training, but then she saw various details. On the screen she had written that books are food for thought. She had to keep all the books bought or read by the resurrected during his or her life. Seeing this, Iris immediately ran to the bookshelf, thinking that there was probably even her story Resurrection to Save the World. It took her some time to sort through several books that she had read during her life, and soon, she finally found the right story. She quickly glanced at the table of contents and was happy that the last chapter was there as well. This would greatly increase her chances of survival, so Iris breathed a sigh of relief. The girl thought about the fact that if she called the system in some unusual way, like the sound of knocking on the door, she believed that this could work. Eventually, Iris turned to the system and asked everything about the summer, and it was given to her. Then, a new notification appeared that she was to receive a one-time cash payment. Iris was shocked to hear about this, but in a pleasant way because it could make her job much easier. In the end, she was immediately showered with a multitude of gold coins. The girl was very surprised for a while because she certainly did not expect to receive such a large sum. It was an insurance cash benefit which was based on the conditions of life prior to the death of the bearer. There was an incredible amount of gold coins, and it was all given to her in cash. This was the so-called life insurance for Iris. The girl thought about the fact that since she now had money, there had to be some kind of store. And immediately after that, all the resources of the cash store began to load. It was an exclusive shop of the resurrected. There were goods that increased the probability of survival. If the girl had money, she could live in grand style in the S-class novel. Iris was very surprised because this store really had an incredibly large number of different necessary things. The girl immediately thought that most likely she would now live in this way on this money. It was a little strange for her to spend her death compensation after her death. However, she still had little choice. So she was not going to give it up. With such advantages of reincarnation, she would be able to live very well. So Iris was not at all sad about how the circumstances turned out. At that moment, she really wanted to go shopping. After all, she had a lot of coins. And besides, she could recharge her wallet later, so she definitely couldn't deny herself anything. However, the girl still thought that despite the large amount of money, she still had to think carefully about her purchases and weigh the pros and cons. But as soon as Iris decided to get acquainted with the assortment of the virtual store, she saw a package of changing abilities. It was a must-have pack for fantasy and martial arts lovers, allowing her to choose one type of combat ability each day that matched her world, such as superpowers, magic, martial arts, and the like. Seeing this advantage, the girl immediately lit up with happiness and thought that this was what she needed to buy first. Since she was now in a world with complexity, this ability was catastrophically necessary. In fact, in the SKU, there was both magic and superpowers and even supernatural abilities. Respectively, such a package of superpowers was very useful to her. Iris immediately bought it. After that, she saw another interesting thing, namely support for rapid growth. It was the patronage of the gods of the Bureau of the Afterlife that doubled the speed of achieving all abilities. Iris thought that this thing would also be very necessary for her, so she wanted to buy it too. The girl believed that if she bought additional abilities, then progress would speed up. However, as soon as she was about to buy this thing, she received a notification that the purchase was unavailable. Seeing this, she was very surprised and did not understand why everything was unavailable. But then she received a new notification stating that a higher version of the product was being used. In fact, the support for superfast growth was not for sale. It was the protection of God's Bureau of the Afterlife, which increased the indicator of all competencies by 5 times. Although this is assessed as an overbalance, it was included in the limited benefits of the full life insurance package. After reading about this, Iris was surprised because it meant that even with money, it would not be possible to buy this limited privilege. In the end, she was still able to acquire these things after some time, because the change of abilities, super fast growth, mandatory training period, and combined training, all of this was specially designed for the S level. As a result, the system sent her a notification that the background for the level and story had been completed, and Iris realized that this was a story with endless reincarnation. At that moment, it was incredibly important for her to know how many levels of reincarnation the main character had already gone through. According to the novel Resurrection to Save the World, the hero returned to the starting point of the disaster. The attitude of people in all these reincarnations included betrayals and strong alliances, as was usually the case with sailors on sinking ships. The main character, he was a kind and faithful holy man who served God, and for them he was just an excellent prey. So in each reincarnation, the good main character gradually became hardened due to losses, betrayals, and all sorts of cruel situations, and accordingly his character changed dramatically. Iris knew that everything was getting worse with each level, so she really hoped that she was now at a high level because she wanted to avoid those terrible sad emotions that were supposed to be ahead. After all, the further the hero went, the more chances the world had to be saved. And this meant that Iris herself would soon receive a notification from the system that after training, the 17th level of the story would begin. Seeing this, the girl was incredibly upset and lost all hope. And this happened because in this glass story there was one very special level, the 17th, which she would end up on. The reason for this is that as soon as the main character returns to his homeland, he is killed by the final boss of the story, and if this was all so, then Iris understood that the situation was not going in the best way for her. The girl fell to the ground and burst into tears. She did not understand why everything turned out this way, and also tried to understand why she ended up in this particular time frame. If the heroes die when everything just begins, then something will need to be done with the final villain, because he was a key figure in the hero's worldview. And Iris also knew that even if she saved the main character, she would have to fight the villain after 70 rounds of reincarnation, but not after 17. She even began to doubt whether she would be able to implement all this at all. For some time, the girl cried and felt sorry for herself. But soon, she finally stopped being upset. Iris knew that she had no other choice, so she had to get out of this situation with what she had. The girl knew that even if there was no main character, she would have to become strong on her own and believe only in her own strength so that she could survive. Eventually, after some more time, the system review was completed and training could finally begin. It was a training quest, a time of compulsory training for the sake of a wise life resurrected from the level. The system sent her a notification that when the original story begins, the only correct answer will be upgrade, and she was also offered to improve and hone her moral and physical perfection to be in the top 100 in the world. She was also told about the current rating, the time left until the end of training, and the penalties for failure. The last point surprised her the most, because the penalty was death. Iris was very surprised to see this, because she thought that it was too harsh a penalty for failure. She had not yet managed to resolve all the issues with the system, when suddenly someone ran into her room. It was a little brunette. She turned to Iris and said that she had finally found her, but the girl herself was very scared, and looking at this stranger, she could not remember at first who she was. But the girl suddenly, for no apparent reason, stopped in one place and began to scream throughout the house that Iris was hiding in this place. The girl was shocked. She even covered her ears from how loudly the girl was screaming, and she herself tried to understand why she suddenly started screaming like that. But right after this, brunette, an evil maid, ran into the room. She called Iris a glutton and lazy woman and asked what she was doing in the room instead of helping in the kitchen. Iris was generally surprised that she had to help in the kitchen, so she didn't respond to this. The maid suddenly grabbed her by the hand and began to lead her downstairs. She said that she had no time to preen herself and play with toys. She had to do her duties and not have fun. But after that, suddenly a young guy with glasses entered the room. He turned to the meme and said that Iris was still too small. How come this guy said it was too cruel to send her to the kitchen? Then a little boy appeared who also had bright pink hair. This man was his father, but the boy agreed with him and said that he was ready to work instead of her, because she was still too young for such work. Iris noticed at the same time that he had the same hair color as hers. And besides, both of these guys were incredibly handsome. The older man asked the maid to think again because he was afraid that his daughter might get hurt in such a dangerous and busy place as the kitchen. He definitely wouldn't want to allow any injury to happen to her body, so he really wanted the maid to change her mind. And when Iris heard that he called her his daughter, she realized that these two were her family. She thought about this word because in her past life she had a simply disgusting family, and she really hoped that this time she would be a little luckier. But the maid suddenly started shouting loudly at the man and told him to return to his place because he had a lesson at that moment. She also said that he was an alchemist, and she did not understand how much longer he would cover for his daughter. She believed that at the age of 10, it was already possible to fulfill these duties. The woman also asked who would pay for their food in that case, but the little boy objected to the maid and said that 11-year-old Nelly did not work. The maid immediately screamed and said that this was a completely different situation. Her daughter did not need hard work because she would be in the car market. The woman also said that she could hurt her little hands, so she didn't want to hear anything more about it. She said that the maids were under her power, so if he continues in the same spirit to interfere with her doing her job, then she will not be afraid of his status and will say everything she thinks. Iris just stood to the side and watched this whole situation when suddenly she felt someone touch her shoulder. When the girl turned around, you saw that it was Nelly. And smiling maliciously, you asked if she really didn't want to cry that day like always. Nelly continues to smile and said, "You must have tears in your eyes," remembering her slap in the face that time. As soon as Iris heard about the assault, she was a little surprised. However, she was still happy that this girl behaved in such a way, because the antagonist was now clearly visible. While the maid was arguing with the alchemist, she got tired of all this and shouted loudly and told him to stop and go away before they were sent to the parachute room. The man, hearing about the laundry, was immediately very scared because so many of the strongest maids were sent there. However, even they came out of there exhausted from the heat and hard work. Therefore, the man understood that it was better for him not to continue these disputes because he did not want to be there. Iris decided to save them while it was not too late. She stepped forward and said that she would help her in the kitchen, and there was no problem with that. Now that she had a rough idea of the relationship, she believed that it was time to put things in order. After all, she didn't want it to continue. She felt bad that her family pitied her, so the girl was going to show that she could stand up for herself. And besides, the cash store sold not only superpowers, so she happily smiled and told her family that everything was fine and she could really handle this job. In fact, there was also a skill pack in the store. She could boost skills by choosing one type of non-combat skill that matched the type of job. It could be cooking, gardening, woodworking, and alchemy that helped those resurrected to life. So, without thinking twice, Iris acquired this package of opportunities. She also chose the special gift of the chef. She activated the ability of knowledge of ingredients, as well as fantastic cutting of products and taste that was worthy of a sommelier. In the end, the cleaning of the kitchen without a single speck of dirt was also activated. Iris felt all this power and strength that she had acquired in her hands, so she was ready for battle. Soon, together with the maid, she went to the kitchen. The woman gave her the job of cutting fruits and vegetables. First, she washed all the broccoli. After that, Iris moved on to the amazing cutting of fruits and vegetables. As soon as everything was finished, the maids who worked in the kitchen were very amazed. The women did not expect to see such a perfect result from the little girl. Well, Iris smiled happily and said that she cut mini carrots and Brussels sprouts, as well as garlic and onions and mushrooms, and she also cut them perfectly evenly, just as it was needed. Iris also put aside the stale ingredients and cut up the meat. She asked the head cook if the size of the pieces was right for them. The maid said it was cut just perfectly, and the girl also said that the cream was whipped to perfection, so they didn't have to worry. The girl began to stretch her shoulders and said that her arms were starting to hurt a little. She asked if she could rest a little before her next job. The maid, who was amazed by her level of work, immediately said that of course she could sit down and take a rest, because she fully deserved it. And she smiled joyfully, sat there for literally 2 seconds and already felt vigor. The girl stood up from her seat and said that she was now ready to leave. The maids, as soon as they saw that she had rested so quickly, were even more amazed. One of them said that it was very surprising that she succeeded in absolutely everything that was entrusted to her. They did not expect such skill from a small child. And besides, even with all this, she enjoyed such hard work. In fact, it was true, because Iris could literally feel how her experience grew and accumulated. Accordingly, she was only happy that she was doing all this work. But the maids thought that it was very nice and accepted this girl into their team as one of their own. In the end, they realized that Leonardo's daughter was not at all what they thought, but completely different. One of the maids treated her to delicious cookies, and they also began to thank and praise Iris's work. The main thing is that the maid who brought the girl to the kitchen was unhappy to hear all this. Of course, she brought Iris to this place for a completely different reason. She wanted to mock her for her own pleasure. But in the end, everything turned out completely differently. Then, suddenly, one of the cooks who was busy with the main course turned to Iris and asked if she could come over and try the creamy stew. The other maids, as soon as they heard this, were very surprised, because the chef had never allowed anyone near his dishes. Tasting dishes was the pride and privilege of her profession, so even the maid who brought Iris was very impressed. Then, she could no longer contain her anger and screamed and asked what the chef Paisha was thinking about. How she could let a child in who would simply slobber all over the food and not even understand its taste. The chef looked at her with disapproval and asked why Miss was wasting her time being in this place instead of doing her job. She asked that the maid leave her area of responsibility and not get in their way. Of course, the maid didn't like all this, but in the end she was simply thrown out of the kitchen. And Iris at the same time approached the saucepan and was going to try. This stew is parallel to it. She also activated the power of the cache, namely the ability of taste worthy of a sommelier. After the girl tried the stew, she said that something was missing and asked what the chef thought about the dried peppers on the tip of the knife. When the woman heard this, a small smile suddenly appeared on her face. The chef asked Iris if she would like to learn how to cook and move into that part of the kitchen. The maids, hearing all this, were amazed. They certainly did not expect such a turn of events, especially the maid who brought her to this place. Iris wondered if she wanted to become an apprentice, and the chef thought that this child had undeniable talent, so she didn't want to let him go. The girl, of course, did not object and said that she would be happy to learn how to cook. She believed that it would be better this way because in this way experience would accumulate even faster, and therefore it would only benefit her. And besides, Iris really liked the evil expression on her face and the maid who wanted to set her up. However, in the end, she fell into her own trap. After the enraged maid left, the cook turned to the girl and told her to come to the kitchen at 7 in the morning the next day, because she was still too young to go a little earlier. The maid who had been standing behind until now was surprised that the chief had decided to teach this girl after all. This had never happened before in their entire career. Iris smiled happily and said that she would definitely come, after which the girl began the rest of the work that she had to do. After some time, one of the cooks suddenly came up to her and told her to go and rest a little. Otherwise, she would already have calluses this way. But the girl replied that everything was fine. She could do everything herself, so they didn't have to worry about something going wrong. In fact, she was still on the body. Very soon, she had to raise her experience to a new level, so she could not miss this valuable chance. The workers praised her and said that if she needed help, she could definitely call them. The girl replied that she understood everything and thanked them. The girls then went off to do their remaining chores, and Iris was left alone and continued kneading the dough. In the end, it all began to remind her of the part-time job she had during her life. Before or after the resurrection, everything turned out to be the same. In fact, her hands even started to hurt a little because of how much work she had already done. If she knew that this would happen after death, she definitely wouldn't have suffered so much while working hard during her life. She thought that she just needed to end up in this fantasy world initially and everything would be fine. More than anything, she would have liked to be at that moment the sweet child of a powerful king or the secret offspring of an influential count. She believed that absolutely everyone should have access to the love of loved ones and the opportunity to feel the care of this world. However, unfortunately, she was deprived of all this. In the end, when she was already starting to finish with the test, Iris was very proud of herself. It was even hard for her to believe that she really did all this on her own. At that moment, the same little boy who was her brother entered the kitchen. Seeing Iris, he asked if everything was okay with her and if anything had happened to her. Iris, upon seeing him, immediately thought about what his name was, but she decided to just call him Prince, deciding that such a greeting could be quite normal. The guy agreed with what she called him and, coming closer, said that she was very late. The breeze of history had just ended. After that, he took the whisk from her and continued to stir the dough, saying that now he would work for her and Ari could rest a little. Smiling, he also said that she had worked hard and deserved a rest. The girl, hearing these words, was amazed. She already wanted to tell him that everything was fine and she could continue finishing her work. But the prince interrupted her and said that this was not at all the case. He wanted to help her. And after that, he remembered that he did not know how to do this at all and therefore asked what was the best thing to do. Iris looked at him with an angry look because he took her job away from her and said that when he comes to the kitchen, he needs to wash his hands thoroughly from the very beginning. She decided that she could leave him for a while because, in general, she explained everything to him after that. And there was nothing complicated about this work. But at that moment, the girl suddenly noticed his palms and saw huge cuts and wounds there. She immediately guessed that these were marks from blows from a rod, and, realizing this, she was horrified. In fact, during short breaks, she decided to reread the Siguhuas and found there all the information about the Rodlin family. The prince and Iris's father was Leonard. He was a promising elite alchemist from the Golden Ivory Tower called the Alchemist's Tower. However, he became a vagabond because he hated his superiors and was not going to put up with the conditions they gave him. And Count Kellet failed to intercept and hire cheaply a single father with 2 children. He believed that he could exploit him well for his own benefit. Thus, the world alchemist dedicated himself to the Count under the Arab contract, and his children Prince and Iris also grew up as the Count's servants. Therefore, Iris was a servant who did the housework, and the prince, instead of a scoundrel, became a servant who was beaten by everyone. When the girl noticed his wounds, he suddenly hid them from her and said that he couldn't answer the questions correctly on the exam, and that's why he was scolded a little. But the prince didn't want to focus much attention on this, so he smiled and said that they hadn't communicated much that day, so instead, he'd better do his homework. Iris did not develop this topic further. However, it was still painful for her to realize that this was exactly the kind of hands a 12-year-old boy had. On his palms were not only fresh cuts, but also old ones that had turned into scars. Therefore, she turned to her brother and said that it was impossible to leave everything like that. The girl asked in surprise why he did not treat them with ointment, since he could have asked his father for it. The prince reacted very sharply to this. He shouted loudly and said that his father should not find out under any circumstances. He still wanted to go to lessons even if he was going to get spanked. As soon as Iris heard this, she was very shocked and could not imagine that her father did not even suspect such a beating of his son. But the guy looked at his sister in surprise and said that he absolutely did not understand why she behaved this way. After all, she had already promised earlier that she would keep a secret about him and that he would eat her. As soon as the prince started talking about food, she suddenly felt very hungry because she hadn't eaten anything all day, so she decided to change the subject. Iris sighed heavily and said that in that case, she would like to go to the lab with him later and look for some medicine for him. She would also help him bandage his hands so that the situation would not get worse. When the prince heard this, he was incredibly flattered. He even had tears in his eyes when Iris saw this behavior. He was very surprised and asked what was wrong. But the guy replied that it was the first time she had called him brother in 4 years. That was why he was so surprised. As soon as the girl heard this, she was very surprised because she didn't know that she hadn't called him that before. And the prince said that he was stupid and tactless. So she said that she didn't even want to know him. Accordingly, she didn't call him brother all this time. However, now she suddenly changed her thinking. Iris did not react to this in any way. She thought that all this happened only because of the resurrection. If she clearly knew how her character behaved, then of course she would not have done it differently. The prince meanwhile returned to the tasks that his sister had given him and said that apparently the work in the kitchen was not as easy as one might think. The girl agreed with them and said that she worked so hard that she even grew up instantly. She said that now he could not worry. She was going to call him brother from now on and forget about the bad past. Iris believed that now that she was in this character's business, she needed to look after her caring brother. As soon as the prince heard all these kind words addressed to him, he immediately smiled and said that he now had a feeling as if he had found his little sister again. Seeing her surprised expression, he immediately explained that he didn't mean that she used to be a fake sister. He was just very glad that she decided to reconsider her attitude towards him. Iris believed that since he was happy, then she was too. In her past life, her brother was also 12 years old, so she felt quite natural in communicating with him. Soon after this, one of the maids suddenly ran into their kitchen and told them to finish their work and come over to have a bite to eat. Iris suggested to her brother to wash all the dishes as soon as possible and go there. The boy agreed and they got to work. At that moment, the door opened again and there appeared an angry Nelly. She turned to Iris and with a smile on her face asked if she had really been put in charge of washing the dishes. The prince immediately became wary when he saw Nelly. He knew perfectly well that nothing good could be expected from this girl. But Nelly sighed and said that if she had ever been assigned to wash dishes, all her hands would have cracked long ago. She said that she had been assigned to prepare tea and sweets for the mistress, and the poor things had worked so hard on all of this. Iris didn't say anything to this because this girl was incredibly annoying to her, so she just wished her luck with making tea and hoped that she would leave as soon as possible. But at that moment, she suddenly received a notification from the system that her cooking skill had increased and she had reached a new level. Iris also discovered new skills, namely, preparing sweet fruit-based snacks and brewing noble aromatic tea. As soon as she saw this, she was very happy because she didn't think that she would be able to raise her level so quickly and also discover so many new skills for herself. But as soon as the girl paid attention to brewing tea, a very good idea immediately appeared in her head. Nelly, meanwhile, did not want to leave them. She continued to mock her brother and sister, saying that this type of work was quite suitable for their status. But when she saw that Iris did not react to her in any way, she came closer to the girl and asked if she had listened to her at all. Iris, who was bending down to pick up new dirty dishes, suddenly raised her head and hit the girl with it. They were both in great pain. However, Nelly became even more angry and wanted to hit her back, saying that they simply had stone heads, but she didn't have time. And all because Mrs. Isabella passed by her, and seeing this whole picture told Nelly not to be reckless. The woman also said that the child who would serve the mistress would not be able to curb her temper. The girl immediately asked her for forgiveness and said that this would not happen again. Then, Isabella asked if she had finished the task of weighing the tea leaves that she had assigned to her. Nelly didn't know what to answer to this because she had been too busy bullying her brother and sister all this time. Iris, who still felt a pain in her head, thought that they were probably preparing a tea party for the countess. And that meant that for her, it was a wonderful opportunity. Smiling, she stepped forward and turned to the senior maid, saying that she would like to ask if she could make the ladies some tea with sweets. Isabella, seeing this desire, was very amazed and asked if it was true that this little girl was Iris. The girl smiled happily and immediately said that everything was correct. She would like to make tea for those who worked hard together. Isabella still entrusted her with this task, but told her to try hard. Nelly, who was still a little jealous of her, decided not to show it and thought that the girls should have tried even better. Iris, meanwhile, prepared all the necessary accessories for brewing tea, and eventually, as soon as she began to do this ceremony, even the cooks who were nearby smelled a pleasant aroma. They were amazed at how Iris brewed the tea. However, soon after she started, the girl finally finished and brought a whole tray with cups of tea. She said that they should definitely try it, and the girl also put several wonderful desserts on the table so that they could rest and enjoy them. Those who had been working hard all this time decided to really take a break and were also very interested in trying the tea brewed by the newbie. Iris wished them bon appetit and waited to see their reaction after at least one of the maids tried her tea. And as soon as this happened, the maids were delighted. They had never tasted such delicious tea before. They even found it hard to believe that it was ordinary black tea. Isabella then turned to Chef Paisha and said that she would also like to taste this tea in order to understand what they admired so much. But the chef smiled happily and said that if she wanted to try it so much, she should have asked Iris for permission. After all, she was the one who brewed it. Smiling, Iris said that everything was fine. She handed her the cup and said that, of course, the woman could try it. Bella immediately took and tried this tea and was pleasantly surprised by the taste she felt. The woman suddenly looked angrily at Iris and said that it was just stupid. Paisha, hearing this, immediately began to stand up for the child. She told Isabella not to dare talk to the girl like that. Did she really decide to find fault with the very tasty tea? But Isabella immediately told the chef that she was in her right mind. She just had to admit that it was stupid because Nelly's skills in the kitchen were no good. As soon as Iris heard these explanations, she was amazed because she would never have even thought that this was an expression of positive emotions on her part. And as soon as Nelly heard that they began to criticize her, she did not understand how she could understand this. Because she so hoped that she would be able to enjoy Iris's failure in this matter. She didn't understand how Iris could earn praise from Isabella. Even she had never managed to do that. Naisha, hearing these insults, immediately told Isabella not to talk nonsense because Nelly was also still studying, so it was unfair for her to be able to insult in this way. But the head maid was not going to go back on her words, continuing to shout. She said that Nelly did not have a drop of talent, and therefore she could no longer be allowed to do this. Yes, the woman said that since Iris brewed this tea, she was ready to take on her training. She also said that the girl should come to her at this time from tomorrow. The chef was immediately indignant upon hearing this, since she was the first to find talent in Aries, and said that Isabella would definitely not be able to lure her over to her side, since she would be learning from her in the kitchen. The woman said that she was born to do this, so she was going to polish her talent well and make her a real pro. The friend grabbed Isabella by the hands and simultaneously asked if the girl would like them both to teach her. Iris was genuinely surprised by such a proposal. She smiled, looked at Elite in order to gloat, and told the women to take care of her. The girl, hearing all this, was very angry. She couldn't even contain her emotions, and because of this she screamed throughout the entire kitchen. A few more hours passed since then, It was already getting dark outside. Eris finally finished working. She entered her brother's room and said that she had returned and also asked if he had already smeared his hands, as she had asked. The prince looked at her with a pitiful look and asked for forgiveness, saying that there was no ointment in his father's bag, and accordingly, he did nothing. When the sister heard this, she was shocked. She could not believe that there was no ointment at all in her father's bag. She thought that a conscientious alchemist would have many different ointments for different degrees of damage. However, apparently she was wrong. But the principal explained that in fact the maids often stole such ointments to moisturize the skin. As soon as Iris heard this, she was indignant. She could not believe that knowing this information, he did not even tell her butler. The guy sighed heavily and said that they were all accomplices there. The butler, the maids, even the history teacher. They were all connected to each other. Iris thought that all this was simply unthinkable. Such situations irritated her even more. The relationships in Rodelin's family really left much to be desired. So the girl thought that she still had a lot of work to do. In fact, doctors were highly valued in this world. Because supernatural power was difficult to awaken due to the small number of capable people, and the government monopolized human resources, but there was something that could replace the acute shortage for doctors, and that was the healing potion of the alchemists. Leonard Rodelin was a high-class alchemist. The Tower of Gold Ivory, accordingly, his maze were simply of the highest quality. Suddenly, the prince said that there was nothing he could do. He could smear it next time if there was anything left. So she advised her sister not to get upset because, in his opinion, it wasn't that important. But Iris noticed how upset he himself was, because after all, these cuts bothered him quite a lot. So she decided to cheer him up and, coming closer, asked if he was in a lot of pain. The guy forced a smile and said that it wasn't really that much. It was just the first time she offered to help apply the ointment. So he was very sorry that she wasn't there. Iris couldn't believe her ears. She thought that since he was sad about this, there was nothing she could do, and she couldn't even cheer him up. She looked around and looked into her father's resources. She noticed that there were some ingredients and even equipment left in the room. For this reason, the girl decided that from the remaining, she could create an ointment for her brother herself. Iris went into the store and bought a pack of alchemy abilities. She was going to create a healing ointment for her brother on her own, and additional resources could really help her with this. Her first level was recognizing alchemical ingredients. She would be able to create a soft cream to moisturize the skin and a fragrant natural cream soap. Because of this, Iris was a little upset because she needed a completely different remedy. However, she believed that it would only become available after she increased her level. She decided not to be too upset because she could handle everything first. Iris would make cream and soap, thus increasing her level. And after that, other available means would open up for her. She stepped aside and asked her brother to help her. Then she would help him. The prince did not understand at all what she meant because they did not have ointment. She asked him to not ask me unnecessary questions and just do what she asks. And soon, they will have an ointment. The guy didn't object because he enjoyed spending time with his sister. And after many hours, it was already completely dark outside. Leonard was just returning from work, and as soon as he entered the room, he was very amazed by what he saw. And all because the room was incredibly messy, all his jars and tools were scattered around and his children were sleeping just on the floor. He was so surprised that he couldn't even hold his loud voice and asked what all this meant. Fortunately, he didn't wake the children. Leonard managed to calm down in time. He put the children on the bed and covered them with a blanket. They calmly continued to sleep because they were very tired after such a day. He assumed that they had fallen asleep while playing with his ingredients. When the man stroked their heads, he smiled happily, but in fact he loved them with all his soul. Then he suddenly noticed a table on which stood many different other new jars. He assumed that they had decided to do some alchemy and was very surprised. He saw that there was also a note next to the jars. There it was, written in Iris's small, neat handwriting, that she had done everything to her taste. The girl also advised him to give the beauty potion to the countess and the soap to anyone she wanted. She thought they would like it. As soon as he read about the potions as a gift, he was very surprised because such a thing had never occurred to him before. He couldn't believe that Iris did all this on her own. He even thought that his daughter was a real genius. However, he decided to calm down in time because he did not want to repeat his father's mistakes. Leonard thought it was a great idea, a worthy attempt. However, it was unlikely to be well executed, since it was, after all, the work of a child. So, first, he wanted to try this cream on himself. But as soon as the man applied it to his hands, he was incredibly amazed. He immediately had a pleasant sensation. It was incredibly soft and the aroma refreshed everything and was not sticky at all. The man had never seen such creams before. He even thought that even if he were a complete ignoramus, he would still appreciate this product. It was luxury-level cosmetics. Then Leonardo was absolutely convinced that his daughter was a genius. He looked at Iris, who was sleeping in the bed in front of us, and he simply beamed with pride for her. He couldn't get enough of his wonderful daughter and decided that tomorrow he would teach her full-fledged alchemy, because such talent shouldn't go to waste. While Iris was sleeping, she had a terrible dream from her past. These were all memories from her real life, which was completely unhappy. The first part of this dream was about her sitting at her parents' funeral and also hearing the arguments of her distant relatives who absolutely did not want to take the girl in. The woman wanted to give her to an orphanage or just have her live on the street. She didn't care at all what would happen to Iris. She didn't want to take her for herself under any circumstances. The man and the woman argued for a long time. However, soon they came to her and said that now she would live with her aunt and uncle. Of course, she was not at all happy about this. However, she was happy that at least she was not left on the street, so the girl was eventually placed in a very dark room on only a thin mattress. Iris, who was crying because she was grieving for her parents, could not control the noise, so her aunt's daughter, hearing all this, even hit her with a pillow. She screamed loudly and asked the girl to stop making noise and finally fall asleep, because she lived in someone else's house and therefore had to follow their rules. Iris certainly irritated her, and some time had passed since then. She had been living there for several weeks and was beginning to get used to it little by little. One morning, Auntie had a talk with her and said that their family was in a difficult situation, so she could not financially support the girl in any way. She didn't object, because at that moment she didn't quite understand what it meant. However, when the next day they came with full bags of new things and a happy daughter who had been in the children's park all day, everything immediately became clear to her. Iris approached her uncle and asked if she could eat, since the girl had not eaten anything all day since there was nothing at home. But the man just waved his hand in her direction and said that they had already eaten. So they were not interested in anything, and accordingly the girl simply remained hungry. Time went by faster and faster. They continued to make various purchases that were really expensive and spoil their daughter, but they didn't care at all about Iris. The girl always wore some kind of rags and was cold, but in the end she was at least able to cook herself some plain rice and eat alone when her entire foster family gathered in one room and continued to have fun spending time together. At such times, Aries cried and did not understand why they went to restaurants all the time if they were in a difficult situation and could not even support her normally. When the girl grew up a little, she came to her uncle and aunt with a scandal because she found out the whole truth. She found out about her father and brother's car accident insurance. It was money for the settlement and even the sale of their house. These people just took it and stole everything from her. But Uncle didn't care at all. He said that it was very rude of her to act like that. With disgust, he asked if she really thought that she was the only one paying money for them to raise her, and Auntie also called the girl completely ungrateful. She also said that if Iris was going to continue to behave like this, it would be better for her to just leave their house. By that time, the girl had already grown up quite a lot and was going to school. Hearing such a statement, she was shocked. So she decided to go outside for a little walk. She went to the park, and there she saw a happy, full-fledged family. Even though it was incredibly painful for her to watch the girl jump into her father's arms and laugh when he told her a joke, and also how her mother stroked her hair, she could not stop. Iris then could not hold back her tears and burst into tears. She incredibly missed her mother, father, and brother, who died and left her alone. The girls missed them incredibly badly in the end, and this dream was so terrible and realistic that she even started talking. Leonard, who was nearby, immediately stroked the girl's head and tried to calm her down by saying that he was nearby so that she could be calm. The woman also said that it was just a nightmare, just a bad dream. Everything was fine, so she didn't need to be upset. When Iris heard someone talking to her, she opened her eyes and saw her father in front of her. She was immediately surprised and asked if it really was her dad. Smiling happily, Leonard said that of course it was really him, and he also said that he would stay with her until she fell asleep again so that the girl would not be even more afraid. She could not worry, and Iris then, closing her eyes, asked him to promise her this man, of course, did so. And until the moment she fell asleep again, he sat next to her. When some time had passed since then, Iris woke up in the middle of the night and suddenly felt that someone was holding her hands. At first, she didn't even recognize them, thinking that everything that had happened before was just a dream. Well, now she realized that all this was not a dream. She grabbed both of them by the hands and, crying, asked them not to leave, Because of this, Iris became very awkward. She got out of bed, leaving Leonardo and the prince lying away from them, and she decided to go on reconnaissance. She decided that it would be best for them to sleep some more, because a hard day was ahead of them, and in the meantime, she was going to go and read a little more about this story. Iris went downstairs and immediately took this book. She thought about what it told about the place where most of all they talked about the family in which she now found herself. Accordingly, she was going to read it. Soon she finally found the right place in the book. It was written there when the count's evil son disappeared. A servant approached the count and greeted him shyly. This guy said that he was a servant and his name was Prince Rodeline, and also asked for forgiveness for the fact that Master Rombido was rude to him. The guy was going to show him the room instead of him when he got to the top, and said that it was the best one they had ever had. When the man went inside and looked around seeing women's clothing, he said that apparently this room belonged to a lady. He also asked if he could definitely stay there. Well, the prince said that the man could not worry about it because these were the things of his late sister. As soon as Iris read this sentence, she was very shocked. She guessed that his late sister was exactly her, but she did not remember anything like that at all from the original reading of the story. The girl even threw the book down out of fear, covered her mouth with her hands, and could not believe that she really was expecting death in the future. She picked up the book again and thought that it would be best to reread it again because it couldn't have happened that such an absurd turn of events had occurred. When Iris read the basis of this sentence, she realized that it was indeed true. She decided to continue reading in order to understand how this could happen. Further in the story, it was written that in the Count's fortress there was a deep-sealed dungeon, one that his little sister went down there. A servant put his hand on the scattered things and the lock. It was really hard for the prince to talk about it, which meant that it was a serious loss for him. At that moment, Iris was finally convinced that this was her future, no matter what. She wanted to know what was wrong with the son of the Count of Kilt. Just blowing up the castle wasn't enough. They also had a dungeon right below, so all these events were very suspicious to her. Well, Iris eventually came to terms with the situation, because she understood from the very beginning that she would have serious obstacles on her way, and that it would not be easy for her. However, she couldn't allow herself to just die quietly because of the plot of the story. She was going to remember the exact plot of the book, and then she would be able to change it in reality. So she was going to reread the whole story as soon as possible and save her life. Thus, many hours passed and the deep night smoothly flowed into early dawn. She finally finished the story and she really didn't like the ending she read. Iris also had severe bags under her eyes because she got carried away and didn't even notice how much time had passed. She understood perfectly well that her life was worthless, but she didn't know how the main character could wander around so stupidly. She didn't even understand whether there was any point at all in such a loser's life of the character. Ira believed that all this was just a real mockery. However, cruelty was not only inherent in him. Even if she manages to avoid death, it will be very difficult for her to survive in this crazy world. Accordingly, she decided to buy herself a package of changing abilities. It was a must-have package for fantasy and combat lovers, and from the two, she could activate one type of combat ability every day that matched the world. She carefully reread the book and now knew for sure that healers were valued in this world. The main character suffered because in the work he did not have a healer. And this means that she chose for herself a combat ability of precisely this branch. She needed to become a useful healer in order to change the course of history, and she ultimately chose the soul of a legendary saint. She activated supernatural abilities and was about to feel this power soon. However, she suddenly showed some kind of error. The system sent Iris a notification that these abilities could not be activated due to the lack of compliance with the requirements. When she read about this, she was very surprised. However, she then received a notification that first she had to pass a qualification quest. Iris was a little surprised because there was no quest written anywhere. So she thought about what she needed to do. Since she hadn't managed to acquire these abilities, she decided to at least occupy herself with something and went to a small church that was located on their territory. Iris sat down there to take a little rest, because a lot of time had passed since she started cleaning and still couldn't finish. The girl thought about the fact that she should clean this place better in the future so that it would not take up so much time and effort anymore. Her quest was a 1,000-day morning prayer every day from 5 to 7 in the morning. She had to pray to God in places such as churches, temples, and chapels. But she also had restrictions. She could pray only once a day, and if she missed 3 days in a row, the countdown would start over. The girls didn't like it at all. The test was for regularity. She couldn't even take advantage of the privilege of supporting super fast growth. So all she had left was honest work. Iris thought that supernatural abilities were apparently very important since they were obtained in such a difficult way. But she was not going to retreat. She wanted to go to the last. She was also very glad that you were on the property, or there was an abandoned chapel, so she cleaned it up a bit so that it would be more comfortable for her to pray. Iris closed her eyes and began to pray with all her heart. For a while, she just sat in silence. There was nothing even in her thoughts. But she realized that she didn't know what she should pray for at all, and in life she didn't believe in God, so of course she didn't understand how all this should happen. It was very strange for her to sincerely pray to God inside the book, knowing that he does not exist. That in order to be truly sincere, she needs to start with faith. Then she suddenly realized that indeed, when she learned that in this afterlife there are also gods, then accordingly this could simplify her task a little. The girl closed her eyes again and, folding her hands together, turned to the gods of the Bureau of the Resurrected and asked them to grant her supernatural power. This went on for several minutes, and then suddenly Iris received a new notification, namely that her quest progress had increased. She read this and was very happy because it meant that she was succeeding, and she was going to put her whole soul and heart into this business. The pen of the Resurrected turned to the dear gods again and said that because of their bureau, she found herself locked in a fictional world, and this was not destined for her. But in any case, she decided that she would not call them gods of the Bureau of the Resurrection, because that was too long a name, so she decided to just call them gods. That would be better. When I asked how it happened that they brought her into this world, after all, she was a simple girl who lived an ordinary life day after day. She thought about her aunts and uncles and decided that she really had not had such an ordinary life as she might have thought. Well, she still said that she still gets angry when she thinks about the money she lost on the house and the insurance money from her father's car accident. Despite the fact that Iris barely managed to survive, she was kicked out of the house by the family that took her in quite quickly. And even after her money ran out, they asked every week if there was anything else. And if Iris didn't pick up the phone, her uncle would come to the basement where she lived, and terrible things would happen there. The mother ordered the bridges to be prepared every day because she was busy transferring her own daughter to a higher educational institution. The address told the gods that she actually has no reason to regret the life she left behind. And if she does, it's only because of the comics and TV series that she didn't have time to watch. But she decided to look for the positive side of everything, so she said that at least she has a system of support for the resurrected and life insurance here. And more importantly, she finally has a real family. The relationship with her new father and brother was very unusual and new for the girl, but she wanted to develop it further in the right direction because she missed it so much. When she looked at the prince and the alchemist, she immediately remembered her brother and father. She even thought about the fact that they were similar in appearance. When she thought about all this, she suddenly became a little embarrassed. She was not yet used to talking to someone who did not listen to her. But the process was not yet complete, so she thought about what else she should have said in this morning prayer. She remembered that she had another problem. After her death, her uncle would take the advance payment for the one-room apartment, and this made her very angry. She thought that she would lose a lot of money again and give it to these scoundrels. In the end, this is how her morning prayer time ended. A special assembly of God's answer to the package of the soul of the legendary saint, and a sincere and pure prayer took place. The girls also received a notification that some of the gods she designated would answer her. Yes, Iris saw this, and she really regretted wasting her wonderful attempts on such ridiculous situations. She received a notice to remain calm, because the worldly spirit reported that her deposit for the carcass was used as a deposit for the life insurance of the resurrected. When Iris heard this, she was immediately very surprised and asked what exactly this meant. The system explained that it was building its own world and the world spirit was interested in it. The skyscrapers of the trials noticed her prayer. However, they were busy designing a tower for the zombie genre, so her prayers ultimately went unanswered. Then she received a new notification that they, together with the evil one regulating the balance, saw her prayers but were also busy settling the chaos with the level of complexity in all the recreated worlds. As soon as Iris saw this title, she immediately thought that this description was a little familiar to her, and then she realized that this was something like God's answer. Vera is a standing spirit. In the end, she tells her that her cousin is incorrigible. She drank and rioted every day of her independent life and was unable to go to a higher educational institution. Iris, hearing about this, was very surprised. She even thought that the girl had made mistakes many times, and in the end simply went crazy. This fact even made her happy. Information about her uncle came through a recommendation from a friend. so he went all in on shares of a technology company that dealt with hair loss. Some say that he squandered everything under the guise of strategy and ended up falling ill from a psychological illness. Iris was not surprised because she suspected that greed could definitely get to this man. Then came the last notification about her aunt. She recommended shares to friends that were profitable for investment. However, she was eventually accused of fraud after she appropriated a large sum of money for herself. Iris thought that, of course, her aunt always wanted to appropriate the money for herself. She assumed that she was now in big trouble after she did this. Then the girl thanked them for telling her this. She was still calmed by the understanding that they themselves had brought themselves to complete collapse and ruin. And she also assumed that the god who had become interested in her turned out to be quite good-natured. However, she suddenly received a new notification that the world of the real spirit would be looking after her. Iris was very surprised and did not understand why this was being done. However, the system explained that the standing spirit of the world felt responsible for the resurrected one who came to his world and did not have time to live on Earth. Then Iris remembered the terrible news she had heard and suggested that perhaps it was connected with the work of the gods in the afterlife. But the spirit confessed to her that some say that because of the gods, the system of soul extraction of a suitable person selected not only the dead, but also the souls of the living. As soon as Iris heard this, you immediately understood everything, namely that her death was ultimately just a bug. Because of this, she was very angry because she simply could not live normally. Then she received a new notification that we are a real spirit looked around and suddenly discovered the eye of surveillance of the chaos in the world. He shouted for the child to be returned. They say that this would not have happened if the eye of the world's chaos monitoring properly performed quality control, but the eye only shrank, wishing to disappear. Eventually, the system stopped and said that she was already dead. So there was no point in getting upset about an unlived life because it could not be returned. Then she thought that perhaps she could skip the quest of this daytime prayer as compensation for this oversight. But the system said that such a system has not yet been approved and would require an astronomical sum even if it were included in the future. Iris then asked if they could make her infinitely strong in that case so that she could grind the final villain into dust. As a result, she was sent a new notification that instead of giving superpowers, he says that the girl herself should build her own destiny and pray diligently. Iris realized that they would not do it the way she wanted. But at that moment, she received a notification that the real spirit was pleased with her, that she was his first believer. The girl did not immediately understand what this meant. At that moment, bright lights immediately lit up above her head. She was very surprised by this, but another notification appeared in front of her that faith in the world of the standing spirit appeared on the continent of Serentra thanks to her. Iris was very shocked when she heard about this. She could not believe that she had somehow been able to found the faith. She was now appointed the first believer in the real spirit and his favorite, so he will now favor her. Iris was surprised that this was possible, and therefore she immediately became interested in what privileges this gave her. She eventually reached the power of the supernatural power H, up to the 10th level, and due to the fact that she was also a pet, she could use the highest level of supernatural powers. At that moment, the girl lit up with happiness because she didn't know that this was even possible. After that, she immediately began to receive many more different messages that she didn't understand at all. She supposed that something significant must have been going on, because one way or another she was going to continue to believe in this beautiful spirit and be a very devout believer. When several hours passed and the day began to go on as usual, Countess Sandra was sent the very same cream that Iris had made with her own hands. As soon as she applied it to her hands, she immediately noticed that her skin became very radiant that day. She assumed that the alchemist had finally produced something worthy of her attention. She believed that even if she fed her son a ton of health potion from the alchemist, he still would not have any results in fencing. However, now she assumed that people were not lying that he was from the Golden Ivory Tower. However, she did not understand why he did not give her this potion earlier, and because of this, she even got a little angry at the man. At that moment, a small black-haired girl entered the room. She turned to the countess, who was her mother, and asked if she needed a hand mirror. She said that she didn't listen to her anyway, and was only busy with her Bianca face, which was a bit offensive. Sandra asked her for forgiveness and said that she was very sorry that she was distracted, and also asked her daughter to remind her what she was talking about. The girl replied that they were discussing the preservation of the Killit lineage. As soon as the countess heard about preservation, she was immediately surprised and asked what exactly she meant. But Bianca explained that she believed it should be taken into account that her grandfather was the last in their family to lose the title of Master of Fencing. Leaving the position of owner of the estate to an incompetent and stupid brother would be the shortest path to defeat. So she told her mother that she thought it would be best for her to become the mistress of the house herself and bring a competent and skilled groom. She asked what Sandra thought about this. The woman, hearing such thoughts from her little daughter, was surprised. Despite the fact that she was her own blood, such things still frightened her very much. In order not to leave Bianca without an answer, she said that her brother was only 12 years old, so it was best to just wait a little. Moreover, she heard that this morning Bianca had kicked out her playmate again. She wondered how many times this had happened already. While fresh hot tea was being brought into the mother and daughter, the woman asked the girl to tell her if she had any problems with her friends. For a while, the countess's daughter was silent. She didn't know what to say to this, but then, sighing heavily, she said that everything was not so. The only problem was that she didn't have peers of her level. But then she suddenly noticed the dish that the servants brought them and wondered if it was really a unique delicacy. The main thing is that the maid smiled, bowed, and said that everything really was like that. This apple soup was prepared by Rodlin's daughter. She also said that the girl was quite skilled at making tea from sweets, so she thought about taking her under her wing and teaching her. The countess at that time decided to try this dish, and as soon as she did, she could not contain her delight. It had a pleasant, noble aroma and a delicious taste. Bianca tried it herself, agreeing with her mother in this judgment because it really was very tasty. Sandra asked if it was true that the girl was the alchemist's daughter. She also said that she was glad that the man gave her a potion for lightening and moisturizing the skin. Continuing to smile, the countess said that apparently even his daughter had worked extremely hard, so she would like them to be generously treated in gratitude. Bianca, having heard about the beauty potion, immediately asked her mother what she was talking about. And the woman said that until now, she thought that the potion was a medicine, but in the end, they turned out to be wonderful lotions. But Bianca didn't understand how was this possible. After all, the man was a confire alchemist and always made only standard potions. So she became very interested in how he came up with the idea to make a beauty potion. The main thing the maid said was that Mr. also gave the servants an amazing soap. He boasted that his daughter had made it, and as soon as they tried it, they were happily surprised, because it really was of very good quality. When Bianca heard that his daughter had done so much, she turned to Isabella and asked where she could find this daughter of the alchemist. She thought that she could finally find at least a friend her own age with whom she would be interested in communicating. At the same time, she was in the garden, which was located behind the estate, collecting a harvest of beautiful, incredibly large tomatoes. She was pleased with how beautiful and fragrant they were, but it was unfair that even after death she had to work. However, she liked this work a little more than in life. But such a collection of beautiful red tomatoes made her very happy. And at that moment, Iris suddenly didn't have time to blink before a whole bowl of the harvested crop was taken away from her. She looked up to see who did it and saw a tall, dark-voiced boy with bright red eyes. The guy noticed that she was looking at him and grimacing. He asked why she, the prince's little one, was staring at him with such a look. But as soon as Iris saw his black hair, elegant clothes, and angry face, she immediately realized that he was the villain, namely the countess's son. She turned to the man and said that it was her basket, so she asked him to give it back and she would continue to harvest. But the boy did not want to listen to her. He took one tomato from her basket and, smiling, said that they were round and hard and were just perfect for his idea. At that moment, he swung and began to hit all the onions who were working in the garden with these tomatoes. They didn't even have time to dodge because it was a surprise for them. However, they didn't even make a remark to him. As soon as he saw that all their clothes were now dirty, he laughed loudly and said that he had hit the target after all, and also asked if they had enjoyed it now. Iris thought that this vile idiot was definitely brainless. She didn't understand how it was possible to cause so much harm to people. After he had scattered all the tomatoes, he noticed that his basket was now empty, and Iris now thought about the fact that she really wanted to throw a few tomatoes right at his face. She was wondering what that was connected with. The boy then handed her the basket and told her to immediately bring him more tomatoes. He began ordering her around in a rude tone. Of course, since Iris was on probation and was also very young, she could do nothing except listen to his whims and fulfill them. The boy, meanwhile, continued to throw tomatoes at the maids and gardeners. He laughed loudly and said that it was all incredibly fun and did not want to stop. Then he looked at Iris and told her to try throwing some tomatoes too. But at that moment, the guy suddenly noticed that the tomato that she gave him was all rotten. There were even a lot of worms in there. He realized that something was wrong, immediately threw it away and shouted loudly. Asking how this was possible, he felt so disgusted that he was ready to even burp. Iris made an innocent expression and asked him for forgiveness. saying that she made a mistake picking tomatoes. But in fact, she did it on purpose because she knew that he shouldn't play with her like that. However, unfortunately, she had to wipe his hand, because there was no other way to do it. She told the boy to stand still and she would wipe everything thoroughly. After she had wiped everything off, she told the master that she was finished and also asked if he was ready to continue playing with the tomatoes. But the boy pulled his hand away from her and said that she would get more for what she did today after that. He ran back to the estate because he was still disgusted by that horrible rotten tomato. Iris, after finishing her chores in the garden, decided that she still had some errands to run in the kitchen, so she headed straight through the garden to there. But then suddenly, she heard a voice behind her that belonged to Nelly. The girl stood and shouted at her in anger. Nelly said in a rough voice that she saw everything, namely that she was rubbing the master's hands. And Iris stopped and was very surprised. She asked Nelly if the girl had really come all the way here to argue with her again. However, she only began to shut her mouth and asked what she had said to the master, why he ran past her and did not even pay any attention. When Iris saw such a strange reaction, she thought that maybe she liked this guy and that's why she started asking so many questions about him. But the girl was not going to answer her question. This made Nelly even more angry. She grabbed her by the clothes and pulled her towards her. She told her to repeat everything word for word. Unfortunately, the world-building spirit was not able to interfere in the disputes of believers. He could only observe. And because of this, Iris realized that in this situation she was on her own. Nelly said in a rough voice that she had begun to suspect something was wrong when she was called to learn how to brew tea. She asked if the girl really wanted to become a master, and if this was really so, then it would have been better for her not to even dream about it. She called her an idiot and said that she would never be able to rise above the rank of a servant. Then Iris realized that it was not about that guy at all, but about becoming a master. At that moment, the girl looked around and saw that the countess and her daughter were starting to approach them. She also saw that many other spirits began to watch her actions. They were waiting to see what Iris would do. When Nelly saw that the girl was not paying attention to their conversation, she immediately began shaking her from side to side and told her to listen to her and not get distracted by something else. She asked her for forgiveness and also asked if it was true that you were telling me not to dream big because your goal is to develop your talent. Nelly said that everything was exactly like that. She smiled and said that the girl was certainly very stupid, but miraculously she was able to grasp the essence of her words. However, Iris asked if she wouldn't be disgusted, since she was an aristocrat and they were commoners. I continue to shout. Nelly said that it was absolutely none of her business. The lady was also of low origin, so she thought that she could easily become the next countess. Iris, hearing this, made a surprised expression, and at the same time watched as the countess and her daughter came closer and closer, and accordingly, could perfectly hear this conversation. The girl asked who had told her that, and Nelly, smiling happily, replied that she had said that herself and so had her mother. Sandra, hearing these words, turned to the girl and asked if they really always talked about their ruler like this behind her back. Nelly, seeing the lady, immediately let go of Iris and could not believe that she had somehow unexpectedly snuck up on them and heard this whole conversation. The countess asked in a very angry voice if it was true that, in their opinion, she looked like a simpleton because she was from a family of commoners. Sandra said that of course children her age can often speak without thinking at all. However, she was most surprised by the fact that these words were taught to her by her mother, who had been serving her for several years. She didn't let Nelly say anything. The woman turned to the butlers and told them to immediately throw this girl and her mother out of their estate because they didn't deserve to be on its territory for another minute. Nelly immediately burst into tears and told the lady that she didn't mean it at all and that they had misunderstood. But the butlers had already grabbed her by the arms and began to lead her outside the castle. Iris smiled happily and thought that she had managed to do everything perfectly. And she also thanked her, the eye that watches over the chaos in the world, for such an elegant elimination of the little pest. Bianca tried to calm her mother down, who was incredibly angry. She told her to ignore it and think positively. The girl also said that the maid had been causing problems for a long time due to irregularities in hiring and waste of materials. The fact that she finally kicked her out was very good and will have a positive effect on their budget. As soon as Sandra heard this, she asked if this girl was really the daughter of that senior maid. Bianca replied that it was just like that. The senior maid was covering for her, so it was difficult to understand. However, smiling, she looked towards Iris and said that everything worked out well. The girl, as soon as she saw her gaze on herself, immediately became embarrassed. She did not understand why she was looking at her like that. Iris also decided that she should leave there as soon as possible. Before she was scolded too. She said that she needed to hurry to the kitchen, but then suddenly Bianca began to come closer to her and asked her to stay at least for a minute. She also turned to her mother and said that she would like to tell her something about Iris. She looked at her and smiling happily said that she would like to play with this girl. As soon as Iris heard this, she was very surprised. She certainly didn't expect such a turn of events, so for a while she just silently looked at Bianca, sat playmate of the Count's daughter. This is a very dangerous position, judging by the history of her former comrades. That's why when Iris heard about this, she immediately became very scared, because many of her relatives' children became Bianca's playmates. But none of them lasted even 3 days, running away in tears. And if Bianca saw them off, the children ran away in panic. That's why this girl was slandered as if she was chillingly picky. But the truth was that Bianca didn't hate anyone at all. On the contrary, she really wanted to be friends with everyone. So now, when Iris was assigned to play with her, she really hoped that the girl would come as soon as possible, and this time they would go far, because she could read books alone. But it was boring to play with dolls alone. Bianca was always very sad because she could not find normal friends for herself. She believed that she did not ask for much. Her standards of friendship only corresponded to the standards of the future owner of the estate. She wanted her friend to have a personality, intelligence, and a sense of taste. She just needed 3 parameters to match, and then she would be happy. When she saw Iris, she thought that her face looked much better than she had initially imagined. And with such complete innocence, she was able to easily drive his servant and her offspring out of the elder's estate, which, in her opinion, was worthy of respect. However, Bianca was not so easily fooled by this sweet smile. Her personality was suitable. However, she still had the next stage to check. Soon, Iris finally came to Bianca, and entering the room she greeted her, the girl was a little worried. But the Countess's daughter greeted Miss Iris with a joyful smile and thought about the fact that she should show a good result of intelligence, and then everything would be just perfect. Bianca sat down at a small table and invited Iris there. She said that she was now allowed to take the books that she wanted to read. As soon as Iris heard this, she was very surprised. She went to the bookshelves and thought about the fact that her vision of friendship was amazing, because apparently it consisted of simply reading books. She looked at all these terrible, heavy books and wondered if this was really the shelf of a 10-year-old girl. Iris glanced at the drunk, and she didn't think that she was trying to pick on her because she was busy reading. So she decided to take one of the books that really interested her. For herself, the girl chose a book called I Am a Warrior and How to Summon the Devil. She believed that it would be very exciting literature for her. Seeing that she began to return to the table, she said that since she had chosen, she could sit there and read. Iris thanked her. She lay down on the sofa and immediately began reading the book. Bianca was busy with her book, so they sat for some time in complete silence. The girl read it for some time. However, soon Iris turned to the Countess's daughter and asked if she could replace this book with another. She didn't object. She watched as Iris chose the next book, and when she saw her nakedness, she was immediately very surprised. She asked Iris why she chose the Bible to read. It was really very unusual. She opened the book and, after leafing through several pages, said that she did not think that she would be able to understand literature without knowing the Bible, and therefore, initially, she would like to get acquainted with it. And Bianca, hearing these words, was very surprised, but in a pleasant sense of the word. Previous friend candidates had never done this before. I went back to the sofa and thought about how religion and culture were the basis for all the arts. Many works are based on religion, for example, paintings, sculptures, books, music. Absolutely everything was built on this majestic thing. Therefore, Iris believed that it would be best to learn more about religion first if she wanted to properly understand the Book of the Devil Summoner. Bianca. As soon as she started watching her new potential friend, she couldn't just take her eyes off her and decided that now she knew exactly what she wanted to study. But it wasn't just these soulless sages who used the knowledge of faith from the Bible. It was truly amazing. And for a moment, Bianca even got a little worried for reasons unknown to her. She looked at Iris and thought that perhaps this girl turned out to be completely different from what she imagined. The next day, Bianca invited Iris to play with dolls, and as soon as the girl heard about this offer, she was a little surprised. She said that for several days they had only read books. So now she wanted to try something new and asked what Iris thought about it. Smiling, she said that it was all wonderful. She remembered how she often played with dolls with her brother as a child, so this shouldn't have caused her any problems. As a compromise, their game was a Hollywood space action movie with robots and Barbie, so everyone was quite happy. Bianca came into the room and said that she would bring toys, but the girls had to wait a while. Iris did not object. After some time, she returned with very beautiful dolls of male and female characters, as well as soft toys, all of which looked very expensive and beautiful. Iris smiled and thought that they were really very beautiful in her childhood. Unfortunately, there were no toys that were so beautiful. Bianca said that she would like to distribute roles between them. The large doll with blonde curls was the countess, and the bear in the jacket was her servant. She also said that she was going to be the senior maid and the submissive servant, and in their game there was also a cunning mistress and a fickle count. Bianca said that Iris would play the flighty count and the young cunning lover after all the roles were assigned. The girls began their game. Well, Iris was still a little wary of this arrangement of roles because she had never done anything like this before. Bianca picked up the blonde doll and held her up. She said that her husband had finally been found and the vile fox was back together. The girl also said in an angry voice that they would be executed that day, and now they would be taken to the torture chamber in the basement so that they would first receive a fitting punishment for their actions. Bianca's last criterion was a sense of taste. No one had ever been able to match it, so she was interested in how Iris would cope with this test. No one understood her interests, so she kicked out her playmates. And they ran away in complete shock and amazement without even saying goodbye to the girl, because such games were completely not to their taste. And Bianca's heart ultimately retained this wound, foreseeing that Iris Rodolin could repeat their fate. She held out the doll dramatically. Well, Iris turned out to be a worthy rival. She took her doll, which was a lover, and said that it was very unfair that the Duke had just arrived in the capital and naively seduced her. But she said that she had nothing with him, so she asked her to stop slandering her. Because the Count didn't have it, Iris smiled happily and said that it was she who was the victim of a love affair. As soon as Bianca heard all this, she was very shocked. She couldn't even answer at first, but Iris was able to cope with this task so perfectly because in her past life she read various genres of novels. Iris then took the Count in her arms and said, addressing the lady, that of course he could not be a traitor, he could never change even if he wanted to, so he asked her to let him go. And besides, he even said that he didn't know this woman at all, so this couldn't have happened. Change turned to Madame and asked her to listen to her. She said that she wanted to serve her for the rest of her life and was ready to repent of her sins. The woman also said that she would torture herself to prove her loyalty to her. But at that moment, the Count suddenly fell to the ground and did not get up for some time. Bianca, seeing this, was very shocked. She explained that he fainted after this. She asked if Bianca liked this scene. Bianca dropped her doll at that moment. She ran closer to Iris, taking her hand. She asked if she could call her by her shortened name, Ari. Bianca believed that this girl was exactly the one she had been looking for so long. This was the very friend who could understand her and in no way judge her. Of course, I was very surprised by the lady's reaction, but she allowed her to call her that, and she herself assumed that she simply liked her acting. I even started to feel a little proud of myself, because I didn't expect that I would be able to play my role so professionally. Bianca then said that the girl could also call her simply Bia, and she could speak in a less formal manner when they were together. But Iris did not object, and said that she would do so. The girl then smiled and asked if she could tell her about those instruments of torture. Iris did not object, and they continued to play. The next day, Iris went to her daily prayer where she said she told about the medieval instruments of torture. The girl explained to the deities to whom she prayed that she had once been very interested in this too, and the little countess liked everything, so she was happy. Now she constantly spent her free time with the DIY, which was somewhat eccentric. However, it was still fun. Bianca's books also helped her. She thought that she even roughly understood how this world was arranged, and Iris turned to the world-building spirit and asked if she could save the books she had read in the afterlife. It would be a pity to limit herself to only the books she had read before death. The spirit thoughtfully said that this needed to be seriously considered before the upcoming update, after which he transferred this work to the newbie deity so that he would not have to do it himself. Iris was glad that her idea would be heard after all, after which she received a notification that the Divine Spirit would like to hear more about her personal life. The girl said that she had already reached the 4th level in cooking and could now cook everything she had ever tried herself. She also received the 3rd level in alchemy and was studying tea making. Isabella was thinking about sending her to the artisans, so she thought that everything was going exactly as it should in this genre, and the Count didn't see anything at all. Remember his son who threw tomatoes? She asked if the deity was interested in what Bianca said about all this. In fact, The girl said that at this rate, their family would not be able to raise masters within 2 generations, and this would disgrace their reputation as fencers. She believed that in order to save the family, which was threatened with decline, she must become the head and bring in a talented knight as her son-in-law. She was very surprised that these were the words of a 10-year-old girl. However, she believed that she was simply incredibly smart and intelligent. She also said that if Bianca became the head of the family, her family would have absolutely no problems, so they had nothing to worry about. However, she still found it a little strange that they had such a smart child, and one short summer in the original suffered such a terrible fate. When some time had passed, Iris, as always after her morning work, went to meet Bianca, who was already waiting for her. She asked what they would be playing that day, and Bianca said that they had new books in the library, so she would like to offer her to look through them. She didn't want to go alone, so she waited for Iris. The girl happily smiled and said that she was simply the best friend in the world. So they went there together. As soon as they entered inside, Iris saw the scale of the library. Before, she had not seen all the sections, and seeing the number of books, she was very amazed. Bianca smiled and said that apparently the librarian had gone away because there was no one at his desk, so she said that she would show her everything there herself. She explained that she often came to this place and therefore already knew the system of arranging books very well. As soon as they came closer, Bianca suddenly became very surprised because the books were arranged in a completely different order. She immediately became wary, not understanding what had happened. Iris, who didn't notice anything unusual, immediately asked her friend what was wrong. The girl, walking forward, answered that nothing like that had just seemed to her. Then she told them to choose their books, because Iris had said that she wanted to read about dungeons. She pointed to a shelf that was opposite them and said that they were supposed to be there. They continued to go deeper and deeper into the library, and the atmosphere became completely unpleasant and even ominous. But Bianca stopped and found the very book she needed. It was called The Dungeon, The Crack in the Underworld. Iris, who was constantly looking back and around, turned to her friend and said that it was a little strange in this place. She asked why there was no light at all in this part of the library. She turned them several times to the bee, who did not listen to her at all, because she took out a book and saw something unusual in its place. In fact, where the book stood, some huge black spot appeared from which fog emanated, and after it also some kind of red beam. The girls were incredibly scared. They grabbed each other's hands so as not to lose each other, and the next minute they were transported to a completely different world. Bianca, who had briefly lost consciousness, stopped and looked around. There were many different tombs around them, and there was a red moon in the sky. With a trembling voice, she said that they had literally just been in the library a minute ago. She asked Iris what had happened, because she didn't understand at all. As soon as the girl saw the whole atmosphere, she began to guess what exactly had happened. But she didn't tell Bia about it because she didn't want to scare her even more. Then the system sent a notification that Iris had entered the public cemetery under the name of Killer of the A-Class Dungeon. Iris realized that they were in a very tense and terrible situation at that moment. For some reason, she remembered the words from her brother's original story about the things of her deceased sister being in the room. He then explained to the Duke that in the Count's fortress there was a deep sealed dungeon, and once she went down into it, now Iris understood where they were and what ultimately awaited her. The girl realized that this day was supposed to be the last for the character she was given. Then she assumed that Bianca would probably die along with her, and it was for this reason that her character probably did not appear in the original story all the time. Bianca, who had been silent all this time, turned to her best friend and said that she thought they were in the underworld. But she didn't know what to do. After all, the head of the house said that it was better not to go into these sections without security. Well, Iris told her friend that everything was fine. God was bound to protect them, so they could only hope for the best, but Bianca said that she was an atheist, so it was hard for her to believe it. The girl then only said that she should at least try to believe in it. At that moment, she received a notification that the spirit was already rushing to her headlong, working overtime. The girl was very happy to hear about this. She turned to the spirit and asked how this happened, because the difficulty level during the training should have been reduced to 0. But in the end, it turned out to be the most difficult. Iris even suggested that they ended up in the Class A underworld because some other mistake had occurred. The spirit, hearing this, even shuddered with fear. But he said that there could not be such a bug in a world alien to them, so something else must have happened. Iris said that she certainly believed in God, but she assumed that it was still a mistake because it was logical that the resurrected could not die. Right during the training, the spirit still continued to deny such a possibility in every possible way, when Iris assumed that he meant that it was all planned. but she thought that it was too cruel. It would have been better if she had died right away, but one of them forcibly moved her into this world and made her die again. Well, the spirit didn't answer this. He could only endure her statement. But Iris decided that it was definitely not the time for her to lose heart in such a situation. She had to gather her strength. But in return, she also demanded that she be compensated for such a terrible mistake, or that the dungeon be weakened, or, on the contrary, made stronger so that she could pass this test. The spirit had to suffer. And eventually, many different dead creatures began to rise around Nick, and they moved straight towards these girls. Bianca began to move closer to her friend because she became scared. She realized the fact that she would not be able to fight them because she was weak. At that moment, Iris thought that it would be best for the spirit to hurry. In the end, he suffered for some time and made a tragic decision. He gave Iris new skills that significantly increased her chance to survive. As soon as the girl saw this notification, she was happy because it really gave her a lot of opportunities. After that, she opened the explanation window to understand what exactly she was given, and as soon as she read it, she was incredibly happy because it was truly amazing. Despite the fact that the regulating balance and the chief of staff, but he swore because the spirit did not write an apology. Accordingly, he was sent to write a note, so he will be unavailable to the girls for some time. At that moment, one of the dead creatures began to approach them. Bianca was so scared that she even squeezed Iris's hand tightly. She hoped that they would at least be able to survive in this place. Although it was but her friend, smiling happily, said that she shouldn't worry. Everything will definitely be fine. Iris assured her that she would take care of their lives. Bianca was a little surprised at first, but these words touched her incredibly. So she said that she would also take care of her. And Iris, hearing about this, was very surprised and asked if this was really true. And the girl said that she certainly had mutual feelings for her. The creatures continued to approach them, and soon the mistress of the dungeon appeared, who was the Order Baroness of the Codex in the magical world. This creature turned to the girls and said that her name was Artemin. She was the mistress of the underworld and decided to greet them personally. But as soon as she saw that they were still small, she was a little surprised and asked if they had really decided to sacrifice them. Bianca was very surprised when she heard about the victim. She decided to take the initiative into her own hands first, so she stepped forward and decided to negotiate with this creature. She introduced herself and said that she was supposed to be the next head of the killer family, and therefore would like to offer her a small but profitable wall. She said that she would order thousands of children to be sacrificed in exchange for her releasing Iris and herself. As soon as the creature heard about this, it immediately laughed and asked Bianca if she really should be the head. However, she still agreed to this condition and said that she should leave the girl who was next to her as collateral, and then their deal could be open. But Bianca immediately said that she would never do that. She already wanted to call her her friend. However, she decided not to do that and said that she would sacrifice 200 people. So she wanted them to let both of them go. Artemin said that they were very stupid and asked if she could trust human children and just let them go. Of course, that would be very stupid and reckless on her part. She asked Bianca if she really thought that such a high being like her would not know about the treachery and true nature of people. So she advised her to decide quickly and not delay her. She also said that this girl who was behind her was just a servant, so she suggested that she leave her and save a more valuable life. However, she also said that in general the creature it doesn't matter which of them will remain, so she would really like them to show their true nature and make this choice. Iris couldn't listen to all this horror any longer. She decided to just shut her mouth, and so she went forward, already preparing for a fierce battle. But Bianca suddenly took her hand and asked her not to go anywhere. After all, she was the head of the family and had to protect her family and friends. She looked the girl straight in the eyes and said that she was not just a servant to her, she was her friend, and therefore she would protect her to the end. When Iris heard this, at first she couldn't believe her ears. It was surprising for her to hear these words. After all, no one had ever said anything like that to her before. Well, Bianca continues to hold her hand with a trembling hand and said that Iris was smart and knew exactly what to do when she got out of this place. So she would eagerly wait for the rescue team and hope for the best. But Iris told B that she was grateful to her for saying these words. However, she definitely couldn't do that. The girl said that she had already told her that everything would be fine, so she didn't have to worry about anything at all. She would definitely take care of them. This Iris turned to this creature and, raising her hand up, said that she would definitely protect Bianca. At that moment, she began to call upon her magical abilities. The girl summoned the coming of God for herself. She knew that the spirit had given her new skills, so she was able to fight and not just give up. While activating her abilities, she received a notification that the conditions for completing the training quest had been met. But abnormal fluctuations in the rating were also detected, so the system excluded her from it. Now she had access to invincibility, all vision, and omnipotence. The divine abilities of the real spirit were transmitted into the body of the resurrected one, and accordingly, Iris was now truly very strong. When the creature saw this power, it immediately said that it was a deity. The power that should have already disappeared due to the god's renunciation of the world eventually appeared again. Iris, who even flew up in the air, said that it was definitely true. After all, she was his successor and discovered the ability of all-seeing. The creature, while Iris was sorting out her abilities, began to activate hers. After all, it didn't know what they were going to do. However, it couldn't let the two of them just take and leave. Therefore, it warned them to prepare for death. Iris even changed a little in appearance. Her hair was now snow white, and her outfit changed a little. She was ready to confront this creature. However, as soon as she tried to activate one of them, she received a notification that only skills below the 11th place could be used due to the low speed of appropriation of the Advent body. When Iris read about this, she was very surprised, but she suddenly saw that a huge red fireball had already started flying towards her. She understood that if she didn't try to save herself now, she would definitely die. The girl quickly opened the ability rating and found that she had one of the abilities of the required rank. This is a barricade. She activated a special shield and thus was able to repel this attack. As soon as the creature saw this power and strength, it was very surprised because even the Pope could not use all this. So it did not understand how the girl managed to do it. Iris saw that she also had God's punishment as one of her possible abilities. So she activated it and was able to throw the horrible dead skeletons that were about to attack the party aside. After that, she also hit this so-called ruler of purgatory. Iris finally sank to the ground and, hearing some kind of groan from this creature, asked if it was really still alive. The creature asked to have mercy on him and not make him suffer so much anymore, but the girl seriously thought about this word. Then she came closer and put her hand on his shoulder and said that since it wanted to live so much, she would definitely cure it now. I activated the basic healing skill, and after I used it, this creature simply crumbled into many small particles and was no longer alive. In fact, healing is a deadly attack for a vulnerable creature, a special mercy for the one who wanted to kill them. After everything was completed, Iris received a notification that she was able to eliminate the mistress of the dungeon, and the cemetery that was buried under the name of the Killets belongs to Iris, the patroness of the dungeons. At this moment, the clouds that had been covering the sky all the time began to disperse, and even sunlight began to shine. The situation was now not as frightening as before, and the girl, looking to the side, also saw a small reward for the damaged boss. It was some kind of fascinating book in a briefcase. She suggested that the books were like objects that taught passive skills, and the bags were perhaps some kind of special artifact. The item was indeed Thief's bag, with the additional ability of bad fame that was reflected in the undead world. Ultimately, Iris simply decided to take these things and examine them a little later and more closely. After everything was over, Iris turned to Bianca and said that she was probably scared, but it was all over now, so they could act calmly now. At that moment, the girl suddenly ran up to her. She took her hands and said that she was very glad that everything was over, and also asked Iris if she had really become an apostle of God. Bianca said that she couldn't believe that the girl had become a saint at such an age, and also asked if it was true that she had considered her to be exactly that. When Iris heard all this, she didn't know what to answer, because she was the first to believe in the spirit, so she decided to say that, in general, everything was exactly like that. As soon as Bianca heard about this, she immediately understood that God apparently had not left their world, and now she knew for sure that he had sent his child to Earth, so that people would regain faith in him. Thus, Iris began to turn atheists into believers, and the first believer automatically became a member of the highest authorities. The level of the world spirit even increased. In this regard, the level of the first believer could also increase. Iris, hearing about this, was very surprised. However, she realized that by turning everything upside down, she created a whole pyramid. The girl was so shocked that she couldn't even stand on her feet. She fell to the ground and almost lost consciousness. Bianca was a little surprised and even scared that she was badly hurt. Well, Iris received a notification that excessive use of omniscient skills led to the consequences of a new fever. To recover, she was recommended to sleep. She had to sleep for a whole day. As soon as Iris realized that she had a fever, she also realized that she could not do anything about it and realized the fact that there was no free lunch. When Bianca picked up the girl who started to faint, she immediately screamed loudly, telling her to wake up. But Iris asked her for forgiveness and also told her to take care of everything. The girl grabbed her hand and told her not to die. After all, they had only just become friends, so she couldn't just leave her. They still had so much to happen. Iris remained conscious for some time. She turned to Bianca and said that she was not dying, but after that her eyes finally closed. And at that moment when the girl used her magical power, it also became visible in the temple. The lighting was amazed. They realized that God had returned. After all, they had a powerful divine aura that even their entire temple lit up. They believed that the divine spirit had definitely returned to this land and immediately fell to their knees and began to pray in gratitude. In fact, he had not condescended for hundreds of years, so the priests were very glad that they were not forgotten and God was simply testing them, and now he finally sent them a sign. One of the chief priests said that the Holy Land is considered to be the Winchester Kingdom and not the Kingdom of Elvenheim. When people heard this, they were very surprised and wondered if anyone could compare to helping the Kingdom of Winchester, but they were going to immediately organize a search team. The main thing the priest said was that they had to quickly get her out of the land of unbelievers and elect her as a great saint. She would be able to atone for their sins. So that's exactly what they were going to do. However, someone found this very illogical and asked when they said that Nadezhda would save the world. This man turned out to be a young guy with black hair standing next to him, and they approached the silver-haired guy who was listening to this entire service. The guy who was dissatisfied sighed heavily and said that it turned out quite well. He even decided to leave monasticism since that's how everything turned out. But his friend asked if he really thought that the church could ever let them go. Even if peace came, then they would be forced to carefully monitor neighboring countries until their death. That is why the church took orphans without family ties and put marks on their necks. He pointed to his mark, which was a vicious reminder that they had no choice. Then he turned to the fair-haired guy and asked, "Didn't Tut want to say anything?" He asked if you were jealous that a new saint had appeared and occupied all the divine love. But the fair-haired guy, who had bright blue eyes, said that jealousy was one of the 7 sins, so he had to be careful with his words. The boy immediately became angry. He considered him an incredible bore and was about to attack him. However, his friend stopped him and told him to calm down and also asked if he thought that he would become a favorite out of turn for this. The guys turned away from the black-haired one. She said that in any case only one of them would go to the master of ceremonies. At that moment, the fair-haired guy looked at his mark and thought that it was really not easy for them. But he really became interested in who this girl who was now a saint was. He understood perfectly well that perhaps this was just an excuse. However, he noticed that Aura was a little different from the old order. However, he believed that this could not be. This girl was now either a saint or a sectarian, so he had to find out who she was. Meanwhile, Iris was already lying in bed with a wet bandage on her head to bring down her temperature. Although after some time she finally came to her senses, she felt simply disgusting, and at some point she even wanted to die. She felt as if she had slept for 10 days, and the spirit said at that moment that he had warned her that superpowers always had side effects, but she somehow didn't care about it. Iris did not regret the decision she made at all because she was able to survive and save her friend. Even if it was only for a short time, she felt incredible strength and she felt good about it. They didn't even have an A-class boss, so she believed that these powers should be enough to single-handedly break the S-class underworld. The spirit was ultimately proud of her, and by the next time he would become stronger, and the power of the coming of God would be stronger too. Iris was happy when she heard about this. However, she lay in bed the entire time after she regained consciousness. After all, she really had no strength, but she received a notification that the spirit insisted that it was a mistake and that the girl should not abuse her power under any circumstances. The girl replied that of course she did not intend to do so because she understood all the consequences. Iris said that she would simply become stronger. She survived in the world without relying on the help of the main character. However, she will need to train for a long time and prepare a lot. The spirit then thought it over well and encouraged her to continue working hard on prayer, teaching, and missionary work in the future. The girl answered him that she understood everything. However, he himself knew that this was missionary work. This was a multi-move game, so she very much doubted that she could do all this so quickly on her own. But at that moment, the door to her room opened and Bianca walked in. As soon as she saw that Iris turned her head towards her, she immediately rejoiced because she had finally come. She ran closer to her friend and said that this was a great happiness and also asked if everything was okay with her. Iris smiled and said that she was full of energy after such a sound sleep, so she certainly didn't have to worry about it. Bianca, who sat opposite her, said that she was glad that she was feeling better. She had been ill for 2 days, and when she did not regain consciousness, everyone around her was already worried. In fact, after this series of events, Iris suddenly felt something. She believed that she was just living in a book in a drama with very sad moments, but she was wrong to think that it would just be a set of fonts. On thin paper, people in this world also cared about their loved ones and friends, and they were incredibly lively and sweet. As on Earth, they searched for themselves and the foundation for their faith. They loved sweet desserts and flowers in the gardens. People around shared their feelings with their loved ones. Perhaps the souls of people who lived in this place turned out to be quite real, and therefore Iris could well believe it. If in the original God left this world, then the girl believed that it might be better if the spirit came to power in this place. After a short conversation, Bianca suddenly said in a serious voice that she had not told anyone about what happened. The phenomenon of the dungeon and her divine occurrence were significant events, but she didn't want to decide anything while Iris was unconscious. The girl thanked her for this and said that she did the right thing in keeping it a secret. However, Bianca was also very curious about something else. She said that she now had so much power and asked if you were going to join the punitive squad and destroy the underworld. Iris understood that if she wanted to become stronger, then most likely this is how it would happen, so she answered her like that. But Bianca suddenly lit up with joy and said that in that case she would also help. She said that she was certainly not a great warrior, but she could help with human and material resources, as well as the administrative work necessary to exterminate the evil spirits throughout the continent. And even when they grow up, Bianca was ready to be her deputy. Iris, hearing this, was immediately happy. She would hug her friend and thank her for it. They argued for a while about who was the most grateful, and eventually Bianca wrote in her notebook that she should have asked for more books about the underworld. Iris then asked how she thought they could best punish this place. Bianca thought for a moment and then said that there were 2 ways to get rid of the dungeon and punish the boss. The first was to simply leave it open, since the difficulty of the dungeon in which the boss disappeared is significantly reduced. Adventurers will of course go there and collect new material resources, such as byproducts of monsters, special plants, and minerals. The second way was to close the dungeon if the dungeon did not have valuable resources, or it was too dangerous. Then the easiest way was to close it and completely extinguish it. Iris immediately thought about closing the library dungeon. It was the perfect way out for them. All that was there was a cemetery and skeletons, so there was definitely nothing useful to be found there. Then she turned to the booze and said that it must have been very difficult for her to carry her from the wasteland to the exit. Well, the girl said that it was not so at all. The skeletons helped her. So she was able to easily cope with this matter as soon as Iris heard about the skeletons, which was very surprising. She couldn't even imagine that these terrible creatures could even help. But Bianca said that the surviving skeletons had gotten closer and she asked them to help her, otherwise she would be punished. And so they fulfilled her request. Iris still thought it was incredibly scary and assumed that Bianca had a lot of strength and courage. Then she suddenly remembered one thing and climbed under the bed, taking out her artifacts. Bianca was a little surprised at first because the girl stood up abruptly, but Iris got this very book from the dungeon and said that it was a reward for defeating the boss. It was called The Bad Fame That Frees the World of the Undead. Then she received a notification that the undead that would see her would generate fear. The weaker the undead, the stronger the effect. She was delighted. After reading about this, she thought that she would really need it, and that it would be useful, so she told Bianca to go after her. The girl said that they had to earn money, and after that the 2 of them left the room. In fact, those skeletons that lived in the dungeon were still living people quite recently. One of them was a prince, and next to him were his 2 faithful knights. The knight turned to his ruler and said that they were finally returning to the castle, and also thanked him for the long training trip. It was very useful to them. The prince smiled and said that they had done a great job then. And the knight also asked what he would like to do first after he returned to the castle. The man thought for a moment, but then replied that he would actually like to try farming. The knights were very surprised that he really wanted to do such hard, physical labor on his own. But the guy explained that during the training trip, it was the farmers who showed their best side. So he would like to grow his first crop and let his loyal assistants try it first. They immediately rejoiced at this and began to throw the knight up into the air and shouted various pleasant words at him. But just as they were about to throw it up again, the ornament appeared out of nowhere and took them to hell before turning them into skeletons. And Iris, together with Bianca, at that very time went there again. in order to conduct negotiations with these creatures. When the skeletons saw this girl, they immediately became scared. One of the knights said that the prince should be behind him because he would protect him to the last. Bianca turned to her friend and asked how it would be possible to make money in such a place. She really didn't understand, but Iris told her to look at all these spaces and the submissive workers who were below, namely the skeletons. The girl explained that there was only one answer. She had acquired a household package of abilities. Now she could stimulate skills by choosing one type of non-combat skill that corresponded to the type of work. Iris chose the ability of the hands of a druid farmer for herself and paid a considerable amount for it. However, she believed that it was worth it. Iris believed that despite the fact that her father was treated badly by the owner, however, the alchemist's landscaping was a very profitable business. And if they can independently resolve the issue of supply and demand for herbs needed for potions, then profits should increase many times over. Then Iris turned to the spirit and asked if she was right. However, the spirit did not answer her for some time. She was even a little worried whether everything was okay with him. But then she received a notification that he ran to her instead of his work. Iris assumed that he must have been very busy. Then she received a notification that the last few days had been crazy due to the update of the support system for the resurrected. The girl granted him patience and good luck, and she thought that God even had to work. This reality was too sad. People after death also had to work, and so Iris decided that even this skeleton would have to work for her. She started yelling at them and told them to gather their bones in their hands and start doing their duties. They had to clear this land from one end to the other. The girl also ordered them to find a source of water and dig a well, and did all this very quickly. In the end, the skeleton had no choice but to fix herself. They began to perform their duties and were very upset because they hoped that they would be able to rest when the AR demon had already left. However, they had a new tyrant. The prince turned to the knight and told him not to say. After all, Artemon not only forced them to work hard, but also made them murderers. Even though it was a family order, they still killed quite a lot of adventurers, and rest instead of redemption was only a dream for them. The knight suddenly burst into tears. They felt incredibly sorry for themselves and their souls. They no longer knew who could save them at all. After all, they did not want such a fate for themselves. In fact, they were quite lazy and thought that since they were already dead, they didn't have to work. They just wanted a grave for the body and a tombstone. But Iris, who was carefully monitoring the entire situation around them, yelled at them again and said that she could hear everything, and also ordered them to get back to work and not just lie around. Many hours have passed since then, and the girl herself joined in the execution of this work in order to complete it as quickly as possible. By this time had already begun to recede beyond the horizon, and Eris decided that she could finish work for the day. She turned to the skeletons and asked them to come closer, by which time they already had a ready well. Iris said they had all done a great job and suggested digging 7 graves on the site and calling it a day. As soon as the skeletons heard about this, they were very surprised. They even at some point thought that the tyrant had killed the mortals and wanted to hide their bodies in this place, where no one would find them. But Iris, hearing these outrageous accusations against her, explained that she was talking about them, and that these graves should have belonged to them. She wipes the dirt from her face and said that they wanted to rest in the graves. There were 7 people in this place. Well, she then remembered that these were not ascetic people, and in any case, she said that these graves that they would dig would be just for them. As soon as they heard this, they were very shocked and could not believe that they would finally have peace. The skeletons also said that all this time they slept 5 to a grave due to lack of space, and could not believe that Iris really suggested sleeping 1 in each grave. They considered these conditions incredible and were ready to worship this girl, who had previously been considered a tyrant. Well, Iris said that if they worked hard, she would reward them on the gravestones with their names and flower wreaths on them. After all, they were people and deserved such honors. The dead couldn't believe that she was actually offering them all this. Iris explained that despite the fact that they were no longer alive, this was the most desirable name, so she could very well arrange it. Then, the knights turned to their prince and said that this child was simply a real saint. She provided them with incredibly pleasant conditions that suited them perfectly. Iris suddenly saw how these skeletons began to approach her, and even thought that they had already stopped being sad and were going to do something bad to her. However, they picked her up and started throwing her into the air while shouting her name and saying that she was an incredibly kind person. Iris was very surprised to see this, and Bianca, who was standing to the side, suddenly smiled happily. She thought that it was already with gratitude and joyful chanting of the skeletons that somehow she had already become on good terms with her subordinates. Iris said that she understood their joy perfectly well, but advised them to let her go. After all, they would definitely hurt their backs. Someone even lost a bone during all this. 3 whole weeks had passed since then, and their garden was now flourishing. That place definitely couldn't be called some kind of sinister dungeon. Iris and Bianca came as always to the morning rounds. The girl was telling her friend that she had finished reading that book about the underworld. She explained that usually time flew much faster in this place than up there. Bianca said that this was actually very good news for their business because, in this case, there would be frequent harvests. Harris agreed with her and said that in this case, their underground farm worked 3 times faster. So in just 9 weeks, they would get a simply amazing harvest for themselves and a great profit. Then they suddenly went a little further and saw those beautiful fields with plants and various herbs with which this dungeon was planted. The view that unfolded before their eyes was truly amazing. The grasses looked very healthy and bore fruit beautifully. I also noticed a beautiful river with water that passed by them. So these plants were perfectly saturated with water, which made them even better quality. She couldn't contain her surprise at how beautiful everything turned out. The girl was truly delighted with their work. The skeletons that were in the fields at that time saw their mistress and immediately decided to run up to her in order to show off their results. When they started running up, Iris smiled happily and said that they had made their farm incredibly beautiful, so she was very grateful to them. One of the skeletons showed her the first harvest. Iris was very surprised because she didn't think that everything would happen so quickly, but she was very happy. After this, many skeletons began to bring her various baskets with harvests of herbs. She was very surprised that there were so many of them and that she could already take it all. Eventually, she took all these finished baskets and went to Bianca, who was sitting on the hill near a tree to take a little rest. The girl put the baskets on the ground and said that they all tried so hard and wondered if it was her aura of fear that had such an effect on them. But Bianca laughed and replied that they apparently had a special attachment to farming after that. She asked how the girl was going to convey all this to their world. At that moment, Iris opened her suitcase, which she had taken from the dungeon, and said that she had one way, after which she warned her friend to watch carefully. As soon as the briefcase was opened, she immediately started throwing all these baskets of herbs into it. She was magical, and there was a lot of space in this suitcase. Bianca was very amazed when she saw this. She immediately started applauding and asked her friend how she was able to do this. But Iris explained that it was a trophy from Artemin in a bag of about 15 square meters of space, so that incredibly large things could be put in it. And Iris explained that she didn't even feel all this weight because she was connected to the subspace, so she could throw a lot of different heavy things there and not worry about the weight. The girl hugged her suitcase, which now contained her first harvest, and smiling happily said that she would be able to prepare many potions from the collected herbs. Bianca praised and congratulated her, and also said that she was very glad that everything was moving so quickly, but she still needed to organize a secret pharmacy to sell her potions. Iris heard this and was very surprised. She asked if the girl was really going to do this on her own. She thought that they would hold a tender among existing companies. But my friend explained that she knew enough about the procedures of such companies, so she decided to do everything herself. First, they will deliver to the store and to the territory for testing, and also asked Iris if she would like to get acquainted with their business plan. The girl took this plan into her hands, studied it, and was very amazed. She could not believe that she did not need to think about such administrative moments at all. All that was left was to make the potion. Even though Iris failed to pretend to be a healing child, becoming a lady in a rich chair was no longer a dream, but she was quickly moving towards making it a reality. While Iris was rejoicing, she suddenly received a notification from the system that an inspection of the new update of the resurrection support system was being conducted. Having heard about this, the girl was very surprised. She was not prepared for the update to happen today. She decided to move away from Bianca so that Ta would not suspect anything. Iris said that she would go and look at their farm again. After that, she walked to the side and opened the task menu, asking to be shown the update topic. She was interested to know what exactly was updated. Then she saw that the update integrated training, now included saving books purchased and read after resurrection. When Iris read about this, she was very happy. This is exactly what she asked for, and there was also an update to the store's cache. The girl immediately opened it to view the new item, but as soon as she saw the new position, she was very surprised because there was the right to change the genre. She could now buy the right to change the genre of the original work of the Resurrection World. Iris was very surprised. She couldn't believe that she could actually change her lifeline with this right just by using the cash. But this meant that her unfulfilled dream of Ronfan and education could still come true. But then suddenly she lowered her gaze lower and became a little upset. All because there was a new notification that a new genre was determined randomly among fantasy romance, yuri or yaoi and others. And it cost as much as 10 billion cash. Of course, Iris wasn't going to buy it because it was a complete scam. Then she looked further at the store's assortment and saw that a synchronous growth package had appeared there. The girl assumed that it was something normal. The recipient of the gift had to be a newbie who had enough potential in this area and had been in the game for less than a year, and the corresponding person would see the icon. Then she turned towards Bianca and realized that she had not seen it with her. And this meant that the previous package was mainly combat and work. The girl believed that she deserved better. At that moment, Iris suddenly became very scared because a skeleton prince appeared right in front of him with a hot cup of tea. She was very surprised that he decided to bring her something, but she thanked him for it. And suddenly she saw a small sign above him. As soon as the girl activated it, she received a notification that it was the skull of the fortress and had a potential number. It also showed that he had the potential to grow if he was taken care of. He could become the god of the druids and revolutionize the agricultural world of the continent of Senetra. Iris realized that this was the icon that was being talked about and assumed that it only worked for evil spirits. But it was useful for her to know that before this skeleton died, he had abilities in agriculture. Then she received a notification asking if she would like to give him an improvement in abilities for 3 million. She decided that it wouldn't hurt to try it, and so she gave it to him. After which Iris smiled and said that he probably knew perfectly well what to do now. The skeleton, who had been a prince in life, immediately shook his head, ran towards the garden, and began to do his work even more carefully and quickly. When Iris saw this, she was very pleased. Then Bianca came closer to her and noticed that this skeleton was doing everything so well, and it was a little surprising. But the girl only agreed with her friend. She believed that she did not need to know all the details. In fact, he had no choice because he obeyed Iris because of his bad reputation among the undead. And besides, it was fundamentally impossible to get out of the dungeon. So he would not be able to take this money for himself and would not run away with it. And thanks to the special abilities, he would work without her visiting the farm. So she believed that this ability could be worth even more than she paid. And besides all this, when Iris saw the smile on the skeleton's face, she realized that he really liked all this, so she did not regret it. After she visited her farm, Iris went back to the estate. She carefully looked at all the rumors that worked there. However, there was no one with a badge, although the entrance was quite high. Iris realized that it was impossible for a person with such potential to be ordinary among these supporting actors. So she decided to check someone else. Her brother started to walk past her, and she immediately saw that a small purple ruby appeared above him, just like the one above the skeleton. She immediately ran up to her brother the prince and was going to see his ability. As soon as she saw all this, the girl was very amazed. She literally glowed with happiness and considered it incredible. She immediately ran out to the prince and was going to talk to him. However, she didn't have time. At this moment, the black-haired boy suddenly kicked him while they were in a duel with wooden swords. When the prince fell to the ground, he had many new scratches and abrasions, and the boy shouted at him and told him to get up immediately and not give up without a fight, because he had not finished yet. Iris saw this very well, but she did not understand what was happening at all and why they decided to simply beat her brother in such a brazen manner. This boy continued to beat him. Iris was not going to just watch this. She immediately ran up and stood in front of the prince, blocking him from the blows. The countess's son finally stopped when he saw the girl. At first, he didn't recognize her. He already wanted to shout at her, asking why she had decided to interfere with him at all. But then he remembered her and asked if it was true that she was the girl from Rotten Tomato who set him up in an ugly way. He shouted at her and told her to get out of the way. After all, he had a lesson in sword training. After that, he turned to the teacher and asked if it was true that he needed to continue. The teacher, who at that moment was not even following the lesson but admiring himself in the mirror, said that outsiders should leave. After all, that's not right. Iris, hearing about the training, was very shocked. She asked, how could he use living people for such training? This was very wrong. I looked at my brother who was covered in bruises and scratches and realized that this was just violence disguised as a lesson. Well, the boy didn't care at all what she said. He called her a bore and told her not to interfere in their affairs. Then suddenly looking at Iris, he smiled and asked if she would like to become his rival since she wanted to protect her brother so much. Despite the fact that the prince was beaten quite badly, he stood up and covered his sister with his body. The boy was very serious. He did not intend for her to get hurt too. As soon as the guy saw this determination in the black-haired girl's eyes, he became even more angry. He looked at him with disgust and told him not to even try to pretend to be cool. He would never succeed. After that, he swung a stick at him and said that he wanted to test his reaction in this way. However, at that moment, the door to the room suddenly opened and a drunkard walked in, and she screamed loudly at her brother so unexpectedly that he could barely stay on his feet. The girl was very unhappy with his behavior and asked what was so unworthy about him. As soon as I turned back, I saw my friend Bianca started to come closer to her and asked if everything was okay with her because she was very scared that something bad would happen to her. As she walked past her brother, she looked at him with a simply murderous gaze and could not believe that he had really sunk to such a low level in his behavior. The girl screamed loudly at him and asked how long he was going to suffer with such childish nonsense. The boy was even confused. He didn't know what to answer her to this. Then he decided to shift all the blame onto the teacher. He said that he had absolutely nothing to do with it and pointed at the teacher and said that it was their training. When the teacher saw Bianca, he immediately tore his gaze away from the mirror, but the girl in a cold voice asked them to tell her one thing then. I continued to look at them. She said the hierarchy is clear, so is the one-sided use of violence against a servant an educational policy? The teacher was well aware that he was in deep trouble and tried to get out of this situation by saying that the master liked this kind of training so much that he simply could not refuse him. Bianca said that it is best to avoid fencing training because it is quite traumatic. After that, she asked Iris to take the prince away and take care of him. Her friend immediately thanked her for this. But the sister of her hooligan brother said that she would tell mother about everything and he would be punished for it. Iris, in the meantime, took her brother to their room. After that, she took out her suitcase and poured out all the herbs that she had collected in the dungeon that morning. The prince who was sitting behind her suddenly asked her for forgiveness in a very sad voice and also asked if she was angry. The girl began to very roughly tear the herbs in order to prepare the ointment and said that she was not angry with him. However, she wanted that boy to finally get what he deserved and stop humiliating and beating everyone around him. She also asked him to sit quietly while she made a special healing potion for his wounds. When the prince heard about this, he was very surprised and asked if she really wanted to make me an ointment, but a real potion. But as soon as he saw how professionally she was doing all this and was not even distracted by the admiring voice of the guy, he said that her skill had improved since they started preparing these potions together. Iris agreed with him and said that since the day her father began teaching her alchemy, she had really improved her abilities and now knew even more recipes. In fact, Father Eris was an elite alchemist with a golden ivory tower. He certainly had a gentle character, but there was no better teacher like him anywhere. And besides, while she was practicing making various potions, she also had her alchemy level raised. She paid a lot of money for the privileges of reincarnation, so she didn't want her abilities to be in vain. After the potion was ready, she poured a small glass for the prince and told him to be sure to drink it all to the bottom. The guy thanked her, but he didn't start drinking right away. He held the glass with trembling hands and looked uncertainly at his sister. Iris was very surprised and asked what was wrong with him, but the boy replied that all potions were very bitter and he knew it very well. Therefore, he needed to tune in to drink it. But Iris told him to drink immediately because everything useful is bitter, and if he doesn't drink, she will take him away, and his recovery will be very long and painful. The prince immediately told her not to take it. He would definitely drink it all, and immediately began to drink it all in one gulp to the bottom. The girl immediately smiled upon seeing this, and memories of her own brother from real life came to her mind. He also always hated Gorky and refused to take medicine, and when he had to do it anyway, he always asked for chocolate milk so that the mixture would cure this taste. Then Iris suddenly thought about making a medicine with the taste of chocolate milk. She assumed that it was possible to do this quite realistically. The girl looked at her desktop and suddenly creative inspiration came to her. She believed that she would be able to create something new and less disgusting. While the prince had not yet finished drinking it all, she snatched the glass from him and asked him to wait a minute. She would definitely return it to him, but before that she would do something. Of course, the guy was very surprised by this, but Iris in the meantime began to add various syrups and mix other herbs. Soon she succeeded, and she gave him the black liquid, telling him to drink it now. When the prince took the glass, he saw that now this medicine looked like poison. It was completely black. He became a little scared to drink it, but he understood that his sister would definitely not poison him. So, having plucked up his courage, he drank it and thought that he needed to swallow it as quickly as possible so that it wouldn't be so disgusting, because Iris had tried to do it after all. As soon as he tasted this medicine, he was very surprised and joyfully shouted and said that it was a wonderful sweet chocolate taste. Iris, hearing about this, immediately smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. She was not completely sure whether she would be able to repeat all this. However, she was happy when the result turned out to be correct. The prince was very amazed and told his sister that he had never heard of sweet potions before, and also said that she would become rich if she put it on sale. Iris thanked him for such a nice compliment, and the prince continued to praise her and said that she was truly incredible. In appearance, she always seemed rather modest, but in the end, it turns out that she has hidden a lot of potential and talent. Well, then suddenly Iris took him by the hand and said that it was not so. It was her brother who was incredible. She knew it. In fact, the guy's potential was that he was a master of the sword. He had a hidden sword power worthy of an auror, and the future of the respected master of the continent depended on Iris's decision. She could pay him a rather large sum of money so that he could begin to develop his talent as soon as possible. That's exactly what the girl did. She told him to avenge himself, and after that, she sent him this gift. The next day, when the prince went to class with the countess's son, he was ultimately able to defeat him with ease. The guy couldn't hit him even once. He immediately burst into tears and asked how it happened that he couldn't hit him even once. The prince himself was actually very impressed. There was not a single scratch left on him. He easily defeated his opponent and proved his strength. The boy who fell to the ground began to scream loudly, asking how he dared to knock him down, and he also began to threaten him, saying that he would kill him. The prince, to whom this happened for the first time, was very surprised. He asked the master for forgiveness and said that he himself did not know how this happened. And the teacher, who had been watching what was happening all this time, suddenly praised the prince and said that he was growing before our eyes. His abilities were improving day by day. He also said that he had a clever and well-thought-out counterattack. He just needs to work a little on his technique and then everything will be very good. The teacher advised him to bend his knees slightly and use his hands instead of his wrists. The teacher thanked him for this advice. He himself was very surprised. After all, the teacher had never noticed him before. Of course, he immediately became indignant because he was his teacher and not the prince's, so he would like more attention to himself. The teacher asked him for forgiveness and explained that he had simply not met such an incredible talent for a long time, so he simply could not restrain himself. But the boy did not understand at all where the teacher could find talent in the printer. He considered him a complete simpleton because it was even visible on his face. Then, he threw aside the wooden stick and thought that if he had a real weapon, he would definitely be able to win. Then the boy suddenly stopped and thought that if it weren't for this wooden sword, everything would have been different. And accordingly, an idea had already appeared in his head that clearly could not lead to anything good. In fact, after training, the prince went to the garden to help his little sister, where one of the gardeners asked him to take the seeds inside. The boy happily decided to help. He took all the shovels and also the seeds that he had to take. At that moment, the prince thought and realized that he had been feeling rather strange lately. It had become much easier for him to carry anything heavy. It was as if he had become stronger since the very day he drank that potion from his sister. At that very moment, the countess's son was above the guy, and he laughed and thought that, in fact, even without the ball, he could knock him out. The boy began to throw flower pots on him from above and thought that the prince had no chance to dodge them. He thought that he certainly didn't have eyes on the back of his head, so he wouldn't be able to notice them in time and therefore get hurt. But the prince simply felt some kind of danger approaching him. He grabbed one of the shovels and, turning around, hit with all his force the pot that was flying straight at his head. As soon as his rival saw this, he was very surprised. He could not believe that somehow the prince actually noticed these things. After this, the boy also swung his arm to hit the second pot and threw it towards the very same countess's son who had thrown them off. After that, his wooden sword level increased and his body became stronger. From that moment on, all sneaky attacks were blocked automatically. The prince looked up and asked who was there, because he understood that it was this man who had dropped these bags on him. He asked him to stay there, and he would now go up to him. The boy, who was already very scared, thought that he really did have eyes in the back of his head. And then he started running away from the roof. He also said that the prince should not come under any circumstances. He asked for forgiveness for disturbing him, and also said that this would not happen again. When the boy heard this voice, he thought that it was quite familiar to him. However, he still could not remember where he had heard it. And Iris, who was passing nearby at that moment with her special potion jars, and saw this whole situation, thought that that guy was a real idiot. She didn't know who could be able to fool such a smart and capable person as the prince, so she ran out to meet him to talk. When he saw his sister, he was a little surprised and asked what exactly she was carrying. Iris explained that it was her potions and fondant. After that incident, she was struck by inspiration, so she decided to experiment a little. The girl said that in the basket there were potions with the flavors of grape, coffee, mint, steak, smoked salmon paste, blueberry muffin, and also a fountain to replenish energy. I immediately gave him one of these sweets and told him to eat it, because he was probably already pretty tired. After that, the girl said that she knew very well that at night he trained in fencing alone, so he had to eat well to replenish his strength. She also said that Master Rombardo also took a lot of medicinal herbs, so he also needed it. She said that the principal definitely had to grow up and get into the Knights Academy. As soon as the guy heard this, he was very surprised. He chewed the dessert that the girl gave him and said that he was very grateful to her for everything that she does. But Iris said that he was not obliged to thank her at all, because it was not difficult, and besides, she needed someone to try her new potions on. Then suddenly the boys took another dessert and said that this was not just a food additive. What she told him then was incredibly important. He said that she always supported him when he lacked skills and told him that he was incredible. Thanks to her, he became a better version of himself every day. So the prince thanked Iris with all his heart for her work and said that she was truly the best sister in the whole world. When the girl heard this, she immediately said that if he was so grateful, he owed her a whole 100 minutes of Igor. The prince, of course, did not understand what games were being discussed, and immediately asked if she really meant playing with dolls. When Iris realized that she was very confused and said what she had said to her brother in her past life, she already wanted to explain something to him. But fortunately, she didn't have time. And all because the gardener called from behind him and asked if the prince had not yet finished taking all these items, and he also said that when he finished, he should help him in the garden. Iris immediately started pushing him towards the barn and said that his name was... So he needed to go there as soon as possible, and she also had a lot of things to deal with, so they couldn't just stand there. Despite the fact that the prince still considered all this very strange, he agreed and said goodbye to Iris, saying that they would see each other again. The girl also waved goodbye to him and told him to forget her words, because he had no time for games. He had to train hard. He also waved goodbye to her. And he himself tried to understand what this was all about, because Iris had never played with dolls. So such a request from her was incredibly strange to him. But after she left, he suddenly realized that because he stopped seeing her often, he even missed her a little. After that, he went to carry out the duties that he was asked to do, and Iris went directly to the estate with her new recipes. She realized that she needed to introduce herself more discreetly, because she couldn't let anyone guess that she wasn't real. She shouldn't have allowed this to happen, because it was absolutely taboo in the novel for the resurrected. However, she didn't know what to do if this suddenly happened. So she assumed that she should ask God about it at the next prayer. And when Iris was about to go into her room, she suddenly didn't notice the person coming out of there and collided with him. Because of this, one of her jars with the potion even fell out and rolled to the side. She asked for forgiveness and also asked if everything was okay with the person she ran into. It was no longer a young elderly lady. She helped the girl lift the jar with the potion and asked if she had really created it herself. Iris immediately became wary. For some reason, she felt very uncomfortable being around this person, but she said that she made this potion herself. The woman then looked at her with big purple eyes and in a quiet, distant voice said that, "This is magnificent and also very original." Iris did not understand what kind of strange aura was around, but the woman at the same time asked if she knew her name correctly and also said that she actually recognized her. Before Iris was no longer going to be so polite with her, she looked at this woman with great suspicion and tried to understand who she even was. But at that moment, the voice of the countess was heard behind them, who, running out, turned to her mother and asked in an alarmed voice what had suddenly brought her to their estate. Bianca also appeared behind Sandra, and then the girl realized that this woman was Catherine Killett. She reminded me of her character in the actual plot of the novel. Catherine was one of the cardinals of the church. The main character was her parishioner. She is an exemplary cardinal, hardworking, strict, and reserved. But most of all, she also had special talents. Iris knew these talents very well. So she became interested in taking a closer look at this woman. When the whole family went out for a walk, Iris understood why this woman was looking at her like that. Now it began to explain a lot. She was a very interesting character. However, in real life, she turned out to be even more interesting and mysterious. Catherine turned out to be exactly as Iris imagined her. At that moment, she received a notification that her deity liked her interest in the surrounding world. The girl continued to be interested in everything. She also became very interested in what the main character looked like. She also hoped that he would turn out to be the way she imagined him, and also assumed that he was probably incredibly handsome. Then the spirit asked if Iris wanted to meet him. The girl replied that of course she wanted to, because he was the main character. And despite the fact that she was simply resurrected and was undergoing training, and her activities were limited, The main characters were supposed to look into this place only in the distant future, but she still hoped for their meeting. The spirit then suddenly told her that it was possible to arrange a meeting by deception, and Iris, hearing about this, immediately became interested because she did not think that this was really possible. At that moment, Bianca suddenly decided to come visit her after their walk. She knocked on the door of the room and said that it was her, and also asked if the girl was in her room or had gone somewhere. She immediately ran to the door and opened it, smiling happily. She was glad to see her friend and of course allowed her to enter. Then she asked what exactly had brought her to drinking so suddenly. She noticed that her family was out for a walk in the garden with her grandmother, so she thought that she would go there too. As soon as Bianca heard about her grandmother, she immediately began to look very upset. She said that she could do without this walk. Iris understood that something was clearly wrong there, so she became wary and asked what had happened. And her friend explained that her grandmother hated her very much, and it had been like that since early childhood. She always turned away, looking at the drinking, and never said a word. However, the girl did not consider her bad. Bianca said that she definitely had her reasons for it, so she understood her behavior perfectly well and was not going to be offended. As soon as Ares heard this, she immediately wanted to feel sorry for her friend, because she was definitely wounded in the heart. However, she still continued to defend her grandmother. This was very unusual for her. Bianca loved her grandmother, even though she was treated like that, so she didn't understand how this could happen. And Juris already wanted to tell her something. But then suddenly the butler entered the room and asked their forgiveness for disturbing them. Seeing that little miss was also there, he was very surprised, but he turned to Iris and said that the lady would like to meet her. When Bianca heard that her grandmother wanted to see Iris, she was very surprised and asked why she would suddenly do this. Bianca at that moment immediately began to remember the conversation about her parents, who doubted that she should have a commoner as a friend, especially considering how their grandmother treated everything. For this reason, the girl turned to them and said that she would go with Iris, but the butler asked her for forgiveness and said that he could not do this because the lady wanted a one-on-one meeting. Iris tried to calm her friend down and smiled and said that she could definitely handle it. She had a plan, so she didn't have to worry. After that, she went to meet with Catherine, who was already in the gazebo in the garden. As soon as the women heard someone approach her, she immediately turned away. Seeing Iris, she greeted her and told her to come in and sit down. She also thanked the girl for taking the time and said that she had prepared sweets for the tea, so that the girl could help herself to whatever she wanted. Iris, coming closer, saw a lot of different desserts, and at some point she even began to doubt that there would be only the two of them at this meeting. Soon she took her seat and was about to take one of the desserts, but then suddenly, Catherine decided to start a conversation. She said that she heard that the girl had become friends with Bianca and asked what kind of relationship she had with her granddaughter. And Iris was very surprised that the woman decided to ask about something like this, straight to the point, and without even being embarrassed about anything. But she was prepared for such a development of events, so she was also going to go on the offensive. Smiling, Iris said that she was Bianca's closest friend. The girl said that she was very good, smart, sweet, and kind, very inquisitive, and recently Iris found out that Bianca had read all the books in the castle, so she was well read. Bianca also remembered all the names and once helped her and her brother out of trouble. She counts very quickly and much better than all the adults. And at that moment, when Iris continued to praise Bianca, she saw a small smile on her grandmother's face, which Tanya was able to hold back. The girl realized that Cardinal Catherine did not hate her granddaughter at all. The truth was that she was simply not used to such a relationship. Iris also decided to go straight ahead and asked if it was true that the lady had arrived that day to visit Bianca. When the woman heard such a thought, she was immediately surprised and asked why she suddenly decided to think so. But the girl, looking the woman straight in the eye with a very confident voice, said that this was all because she was waiting for something to die. Having heard this, Catherine was even more surprised, and with a trembling voice she asked what she had said. She explained that the woman suddenly came to this place. However, Bianca survived, in spite of everything. She asked if it was true that this was why everything happened. Catherine was silent for a while, thinking about all this, but then she told the girl that she was a very unusual child and asked who Iris really was. In fact, Catherine had one secret. This is her special ability, which was called life-death. The gift allowed one to see how much time a person had left before death. Catherine saw it with her own eyes. She was also able to see the rest of her beloved granddaughter's life. And she knew this very well because she knew the original plot of the story. So she turned to the woman and said that she was just wondering why she remembered the name of some simple servant. It was really very strange and suspicious. She said that now she understood that it happened because she and Bianca were destined to die on the same day, and Catherine saw it. The woman was so shocked that she even stood up from her seat, shouting at the girl and asking how she could have even found out about this. In fact, those who had the ability like Catherine to see the remaining life could not participate in the lives of others or divulge what they saw. Catherine was ready to say goodbye to her granddaughter. No matter how painful it was for her, she was unable to accept this pain, and so she simply took and turned away from her. However, now Iris said that the woman does not need to distance herself from drinking. She will live accordingly. She could return to normal communication with her granddaughter, but the woman continued to insist on her own. She said that she would ask again who the girl was. Iris was about to answer something, but then suddenly she received a huge notification that the so-called leak inspector had received the report and was rushing to her. The girl was a little surprised that someone new decided to come to her. However, looking at his name, she guessed what he was doing. However, she did not understand why he looked at her like that, and because of this, she felt very uncomfortable. Iris already wanted to say something, but she kept looking to the side to understand what this inspector really wanted. However, the woman interrupted her and said that she didn't have to say anything, because she herself saw everything perfectly well. In fact, Iris had a very strange number of years of life. It certainly could not fit into one life. Therefore, Catherine, without even asking a question but rather stating a fact, said that the girl was reincarnated, so she knew the future. After this, the woman smiled and said that this was precisely why she changed Bianca's future, for which she, of course, was incredibly grateful. She saved her granddaughter, so it was really very brave and incredible for her. Iris said that Bianca is really smart, cool, sweet, and just wonderful. She is so smart that she calculated faster than adults, and is passionate about research. Therefore, she has no books left to read. Therefore, smiling, the girl said that she was really also incredibly happy to find such a friend, and it was an honor for her to communicate with Bianca. Catherine said that in fact she was really very grateful to Iris for what she did, and suddenly burst into tears and said that in the end, without even realizing it, she turned out to be very cruel to her granddaughter. The woman said that if she had known that everything would turn out this way, she would have definitely loved her properly. She really hoped that one day Bianca would take her hand again and would be able to forgive her at least a little. But at that moment, she suddenly heard someone approaching behind her. Catherine immediately turned around and then saw that it was Bianca herself. The girl turned to her grandmother and asked if all this was true. As soon as Catherine saw her granddaughter, she was very surprised. She immediately asked how long it had been there and heard their conversation, but she did not answer anything, because in fact, she and Iris knew that she had been there from the very beginning because it was their agreement. Bianca asked in a worried voice if it was true that the woman was so far away from her because she was destined to die. Catherine asked her for forgiveness. She said that she had hurt her so much fearing her own future wounds, that she did not even understand how mean it was. The woman suddenly began to hold back her tears. Her hands were shaking, but she continued to speak, telling her granddaughter that as a grandmother, she could not say kind words to her or hug her. She was very sorry for everything she had done. That was the only thing she could say in such a situation. Well, Bianca, who was very surprised to hear these words, took the initiative into her own hands. She suddenly ran up to her grandmother, hugged her tightly, and said that she was incredibly happy that she didn't hate her. At that moment, Catherine could no longer hold back her tears. She fell to the ground, hugging her granddaughter back, and quietly cried on her shoulder. After this, Iris decided not to disturb them. She left the gazebo and was nearby in case they needed her. After Catherine finished talking to her granddaughter, she approached Iris and, taking off her cross, said that the girl had an incredibly bright soul. The woman asked the girl to accept her gift. It was her memory of a close friend. She really hoped that she and Bianca would continue to remain friends. Iris, of course, accepted this gift and said that she also really hoped for it because Bianca was a wonderful person. Then Catherine Sev, next to her, said that if she needed anything else, she could definitely talk about it. Well, Iris said that it definitely wasn't worth it. She was grateful to her. But she said that she was already happy that they both made peace and were happy, so she didn't need more. However, then the girl suddenly thought about all this and realized that she needed to seize this wonderful opportunity. She told the woman that there was actually something she wanted, and that was to go to Sewanchin. In fact, this was the same trick to get out of the training wife that the spirit said. If there was an opportunity to move there, then that was great, and Iris was going to take advantage of this opportunity. Catherine, hearing her request, said that she was a very faithful child and such a request was definitely not difficult, because the day of sacrifice was coming soon, so she suggested going there together at that time. After that, with the help of God's power, Iris was given the first quest, which was called Sanhonchon Weeds. It said that she had to find high-quality elephant grass that grew in the sanitary area, which was mistakenly considered a weed. The reward for success was fresh elephant-tip seedlings, and there were no penalties for failure, and Iris, of course, accepted this quest and was very happy about it all. The girl believed that now she could finally leave this place and see the main character. Several days passed from that moment, and finally the time came when they had to leave. Catherine walked forward while the servants carried their things into the carriage. The woman turned to Iris and said that it was time for them to leave, and also asked that she end with thanks, and that they leave already. Who said goodbye to her father and brother and said that now she would come and say a few more words she was going to say to them. She said that she would be back very soon, so she asked them not to miss her too much and to continue working. The father, who even began to have tears in his eyes, told his daughter to listen to her aunt, not to answer strangers and to always be very careful with food. Iris was indignant and said that she was no longer a child, so she did not understand why he told her such simple truths. But the man objected and said that she was still a child, so he asked her to obey. The girl did not argue anymore. And all because at that moment Bianca ran up to them to also say goodbye. She asked Iris for forgiveness for not being able to go with her this time, but the girl did not object and said that there was no problem with that since she would be busy training the receiver anyway. Bianca also whispered to her if everything was okay there, because yesterday she saw how many things Iris had packed in the Sewanchin. The girl smiled and said that everything was fine. She just got in the mood for the trip, so she decided to prepare everything necessary for this. In fact, about the autumn Bianca were not groundless under the protection of the training period. For Minecraft is a space with a level of survival difficulty F, but in reality this novel is a world with a survival difficulty level. And accordingly, she will face these complications if she leaves the estate gates. Well, Iris thought that since the main character hadn't returned yet, it didn't really matter, so she wasn't too worried about it. Then Bianca called her maid to her and said that she would like to give her a small gift for the journey. She handed the girl some pasta from Chef Peishi, which was incredibly beautiful, colorful, and certainly very tasty. Iris was immediately delighted and thanked Bianca for this. She said that she would definitely try them and enjoy every moment. But her friend suddenly leaned closer to her and said that she would really like to find out later how old she really is and jokingly called her reborn. Iris laughed and said that she would definitely do it someday. But at that moment, the leak inspector was watching her, so she was well aware that she would definitely not be able to do this. Then suddenly one of the servants said that it was time for them to leave. Catherine came closer to Eris and said that she should stay closer because she would be using the space transition stone. The man took out a blue stone and activated it. For a while nothing happened, but soon a bright light lit up and they moved with ease. Because of the bright light, Iris's eyes were closed. However, Catherine turned to her and said that she could already open them. After all, they had arrived. When the girl did this, she really saw a huge estate in front of her, as well as many people around. This surprised her very much. Iris beamed with joy and was very happy to be in this place. Catherine, seeing her reaction, explained that there were so many people because that day was a sacrifice. Accordingly, everyone came out to celebrate it. She also said that many children want to test their potential to apply for stigmatization. Catherine asked that Iris not leave her under any circumstances, because she could get lost, and then it would be incredibly difficult to find her. Iris did not object and said that she would always be nearby. At that very moment, two boys were standing on a high tower. One of them with blonde hair said that there were a lot of newcomers this year and asked how many his friend would like to recruit. The boy replied that he didn't really want to do this and therefore didn't intend to recruit anyone. They also started to see other future saints, and one of the girls said that he was an idiot and knew what kind of education they had for gifted people. But he himself could not normally awaken his divine power at such a young age. The fair-haired guy went after them and sighed heavily and said that everyone was still crying and talking about how homeless and rootless children wanted to get home. People like them live in captivity. Because of this, he felt a little sad. At that moment, the black-haired guy also wanted to go further. But then suddenly he turned his head to the side and saw that one of his classmates with blonde hair was just standing in place with her eyes closed. He immediately turned to him and asked why he was standing in the middle of the corridor. The guy explained that he was praying for those innocent children. The guy, of course, didn't like that one of his classmates decided to pretend to be a saint. Looking at him skeptically, he asked if he really wanted them all to pass, or if stupid prayers were just his hobby. The boy did not take offense at this. He said that in fact everything was not so. He prayed that they would fail and return to their home. Only the guy heard this and was really very surprised at that moment. The fair-haired boy suddenly felt a lot of pain and grabbed his hand. Then right before his eyes appeared the words humility, kindness, confidence, diligence, persistence, hard work, charity, time, pride. He looked at these words, and for some reason the time of pride began to be read. At that moment he became very wary because he understood that this would definitely not bode well. His friend, noticing that something was wrong with him, immediately asked what he saw there. The guy turned away and said that nothing like that and that he shouldn't pay attention. Then he began to turn around and leave, telling him to stop wasting time and go. The fair-haired boy did not refuse this and went down with him. At that very moment, Catherine and Iris went inside. She said that there was a restaurant in this place. The food in Seongho and Jeon was quite simple but delicious. She pointed to everyone present and said that the people eating in this place were mostly children who applied for astigmatization. As soon as Iris looked at these unfortunate children who had so little food on their plates, she decided that this was not simplicity at all, but real poverty. But Catherine had simply decided to disguise it this way. But at that moment, one of her assistants suddenly ran up to the Cardinal. The man said he thought she should show up right away, because the State Council meeting on the budget for this quarter had been postponed accordingly. It was supposed to start very soon. Catherine was very surprised when she heard about this. She said that it would be very difficult for her to go there now and was already trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. But Iris immediately turned to the lady and said that if it was all because of her, then she shouldn't worry. She could calmly go there and not worry. Catherine thanked her for her understanding and said that in that case she would really leave her, after which she turned to Pavel and asked him to show the girl the surroundings of Sewanchin instead of her. Pavel replied that she could not worry and rely on him, after which Catherine went ahead and the man was going to actually fulfill her request. I also wanted to tell Iris that she should play with the children who were nearby and he had to step away for a while, but in fact the guy didn't want to just babysit her. The girl assumed that he simply hated children, and she was very disappointed by his shameful escape, but she did not get upset because she knew that she could cope with everything herself. She decided that it was high time for the quest from the world of the standing spirit. So that's exactly what she was going to do while she had some time. She came to the dreams of Wangchun not at all to see the main character. She was in this place for the sake of the elephantips that were being displaced by weeds. Iris ran out into the garden and finally saw where they were. It was a herb, but it was also an important medicine to cure the plague that was supposed to hit the continent in the distant future.